Shri Pankaj Agarwal ji, Secretary, Ministry of Power. Shri Santosh Sarangi ji, Secretary, Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. Shri Alok Kumar ji, Ex-Secretary, Ministry of Power. Shri Rajnath Ram ji, Advisor, Energy, NITI Ayog. And Shri Manoj Upadhyay ji, Deputy Advisor, Energy, NITI Ayog. We welcome all our dignitaries on the dais. And now may I invite Ms. Princhila Gandhi, Young Professional, NITI Ayog, to kindly come and felicitate Shri B.V.R. Subramaniam ji, CEO, NITI Ayog. I invite Ms. Radhika Talekar, Young Professional, NITI Ayog, to kindly come and felicitate Dr. Anil Jain ji, Chairperson, PNGRB. I request Ms. Poonam Kapoor, Research Officer, NITI Ayog, to kindly come and felicitate Shri Pankaj Agarwal ji, Secretary, Ministry of Power. I request Dr. Sapna Bisht, Consultant, NITI Ayog, to kindly come and felicitate and present a sapling to Shri Santosh Sarangi ji, Secretary, Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. Yeah. Okay, sir. Ji. No, I'll tell you later. Ji. Ji. Okay, so may I request Ms. Soumya Avasthi, Young Professional, NITI Ayog, to kindly come and felicitate Shri Alok Kumar ji, Ex-Secretary, Ministry of Power. I'm requesting Ms. Diksha Sharma, Young Professional, to kindly come and felicitate Shri Rajnath Ram ji, Advisor, Energy, NITI Ayog. I request Ms. Radhika Talekar to kindly come and felicitate Shri Manoj Upadhyay ji, Deputy Advisor, Energy, with NITI Ayog. And now, for the opening remarks, I would request Shri Rajnath Ram ji, Advisor, Energy, NITI Ayog.
Respected CEO NITI Ayog, Shri B.V.R. Subramanian ji, Secretary, Ministry of Power, Shri Pankaj Agarwal ji, Secretary MNRE, Shri Santosh Sarangi ji, and next Secretary Power, Shri Alok Kumar ji, the esteemed dignitaries on the dais, distinguished guests, the participants joining us, and the senior colleague from the NITI Ayog. I extend my warm greetings for joining this event. It is truly a privilege to welcome you all to the release of NITI Ayog study reports for pathways to Viksit Bharat and Net Zero. We have prepared almost 11 reports, and all these reports are considered to be a living document. Today's mark an important milestone in our collective journey, as we will be unveiling the remaining 8 reports under these initiatives. Yesterday, we have released 3 important reports: an overview of the Viksit Bharat and the Net Zero, the macroeconomic implications of the Viksit Bharat and Net Zero, the financial needs towards the Viksit Bharat and Net Zero. All these 3 reports are now available on the public domain. The 4 reports which are being launched in this session, covering the critical domains of the power, industry, transport, and the critical minerals. As India advances towards the twin goals of Viksit Bharat 2047 and net zero by 2070, the challenges remain before us is how to align long-term economic growth with a structural transformation of our energy, industrial, and the material systems. This transition is not incremental, it is a systematic. It spans multiple sectors whose trajectories are deeply interlinked, requiring coordinated action and integrated planning. The reports being launched today are designed to address precisely the system challenges. These reports are results of hard work by the modeling team of Energy Vertical, taking together the industry bodies, the ministries on board, the OEMs, the knowledge partners, the academia, and has gone for a wider consultations. To guide the overall recommendation and the work for modeling team, and interministerial committees were constituted, 11 interministerial working group in mid-2024. And the chairs of all these working groups are present here, particularly for the 4 sectors that we are going to launch on the dais. So please give them a big round of applause. I will not go into the details on these sectoral highlights as you would be hear them out in this session. Viewed together, these 4 reports enforce a critical insights that India's net zero pathway is inherently have to be electrification-led, materials-intensive, and system-wide presence. Progress in one domain is contingent on coordinated progress in the others. Clean power enables industrial and transport decarbonization. Industry and mobility save the electricity demand, and the critical minerals underpin the entire ecosystem. These reports provide quantified pathways, identify key uncertainties, and highlight priorities area for intervention over the coming decades. I would like to place on record my sincere appreciation to the leadership of the CEO NITI Aayog for his guidance and support, and Dr. Anshu Bhardwaj for this initiative. I also acknowledge the chairpersons of the working groups and the energy team of NITI Aayog and our knowledge partner, industry, academia, think tanks, whose expertise and collaboration were integral to this successful completion of this report. As we release these reports today, I hope they contribute meaningfully to informed decision-making and serve as a foundation for building a growth-oriented, resilient, and net zero economy. Together, let us ensure that India's development story is inseparable from its climate leadership. Thank you all, and welcome to this event.
Thank you, Shri Rajnath Ramji, for your opening remarks for the welcome address. Chief Executive Officer of NITI Aayog, Shri B.V.R. Subramaniam ji, is an IS officer of Chhattisgarh cadre 1987 batch, held several senior positions in central and state government and at Prime Minister's office and World Bank. May I now request CEO NITI Aayog, Shri B.V.R. Subramaniam ji, for the remarks.
My friends and colleagues on the dais, Secretary Power, Pankaj Agarwal, Secretary MNRE, Santosh Sarangi, my old friend, cadre mate once upon a time, now Chairman of PNRGB, Anil Jain, other Alok, the former Secretary Power, and now quite active in this field of power and with a lot of experience in the power sector, dignitaries in the audience. So, I spoke yesterday, and the problem of speaking, and I'll be speaking once more today, and a lot of the people in the audience, 80% are the same. You don't want to repeat yourself. So, having said that, let me tell you, how this thing came about. Yeah, I talked about the external impulse. What did we have to do organizationally to actually make this happen? So let me mention that. Like the government, with the Prime Minister trying to dismantle the walls and the silos which it works in, NITI Aayog also has walls and silos. And one of the first things you realize, and I sensed it when my colleague Rajnath Ram was speaking, he used the word, I thank energy vertical, First thing I did was I demolished the energy vertical. because there is no way you can address these problems by having these verticals. And we actually, first of all, because NITI Aayog just inherited the Planning Commission terminology, vertical. So first of all, I changed them to divisions. I made them integrated divisions. And the division is called Green Transition, Energy, Environment, and Climate Change. All of them actually go together. There is no way you will handle energy separately and environment and climate change separately unless you move it without also handling industry transition. That's why green transition. So actually the division is called GTECC. So these are the kind of structural changes you will have to make in government if you have to achieve your long-term climate change goals. Now you can't demolish ministries because ministries have a lot of other functions. This is not the only work. But you will need to create some overarching coordinating mechanisms if you actually have to achieve the goals. And I think that's the lesson NITI has learned internally. I think that's the lesson which we will have to imbibe in government if we have to go ahead and implement these things. Having said that, I said yesterday that, if you want to simplify these 11 reports, there are just 5 principles which you can, if you say, okay, I want to remember, like a Kunji, what is this whole thing about and what I need to do. I said, what are the 5? I said, first, electrify energy everywhere. Wherever you need energy, move to electricity. 2, green and clean up your electricity. 3, go for circularity and efficiency improvements everywhere. 4, demand management using the principles of mission life and other principles. And last, you need to fund this. So fund it, finance it adequately in whatever way possible. That is what the entire summary, if somebody says, are the recommendations. So in this session, and yesterday we saw the overarching framework, where we saw the macro implications, we saw the overview of everything, and we saw the needs of climate finance. There is $22 trillion of investment that is needed. Your business as usual, we will be investing $14 trillion. There's an $8 trillion gap on the demand side. On the supply side, we have a $16 trillion only available against $22 trillion. We have a $6 trillion gap on the supply side of money. So I think we needed to talk when we talked about that yesterday. Today we are going further deep and releasing right now 4 reports which are sectoral in nature. And these are so fundamental to handling the challenge of net zero. We are talking about power, we are talking about transport, we are talking about industry, and we are talking about critical minerals. All of them are extremely important to make this transition happen. What are the first sutra I said yesterday? Electrify energy. And if you want to electrify energy, there you have 2 departments on the dais, both power and MNRE. They are so critical and fundamental. And what does it mean as far as electricity is concerned? You saw that India's GDP will grow 8x. And that is something which is phenomenal. Simultaneously, because your income levels will grow up, and you are also going to electrify all other forms of energy, which is mobility and industry, etc. Unlike other types of demand which we discussed yesterday, electricity demand will also go 8 times by 2070. So this is something we need to see. By 2070, energy consumption will go 8x from what it is today. Now, that is something which we need to now look at, and that is the challenge we should be planning for. And how will that 8x actually arrive at? You want to have that kind of a power generation, but you also want to be clean. You need to cut down, make it more clean and green. And what it shows is that if you have to go from where you are today, and they're just asking Secretary Power, we are somewhere around 500 plus gigawatts and so much more in the pipeline. We are talking of installed capacities of 7,000 gigawatts, 6 to 7,000 under various scenarios. That's a humongous number. This is something which you can't imagine right now what it is. The other is, if you look at the composition of that, more than half of it is actually going to be battery, BESS, battery energy, battery storage. So you see that the composition of power supply and the demand for power will be met from new sources and new methods and new technologies, which means we need to build the pathway. A significant portion of that is to come from nuclear power. The government has passed the enabling bill, but the bill only opens, allows you, it creates a door. How you go through the door and do is a second order problem, which we still need to tackle. And given that we have added 8 gigawatts from 1947 till now, we are thinking of going up to 300 gigawatts. We are talking about a 100 gigawatt target, but that's a 47 target. We are talking about a 2070 target of 300 gigawatt is a tall order, which means a complete change in approaches, capacities, ways of executing things, mindsets. I think that's a big, big challenge which we need to do. Similarly, if you look at industry, we are going to consume more, which means demand for steel, cement, aluminium, all the so-called hard-to-abate sectors is also going to go up rapidly. The economy may go up whatever times, Industry or consumption, even if you do demand management, will go up 4 to 5 times. The question is, this is the toughest challenge. In the entire gamut of sectors we are handling, industry, power, transport, agriculture, waste, all that. Industry is the toughest nut because sometimes there are certain fossil fuel related issues are related to the chemical processes that are there and they are not easily substitutable. So this is the one, and this is the one which will actually be still left with residual emissions in 2070. And for this, I think the mantras are very, very simple, electrify energy to the extent possible. Go for circularity. Change technologies. I mean, clinker can be increased in cement. Steel should go more and more for scrap, etc. So which means you bring in circularity in. It goes on, and I think the details will come out when there is a presentation. And last but not the least, become more efficient in the way you use energy. And mind you, it's not that we are incapable of doing it. I sometimes laugh because all the steel companies which are there in India, they're all global giants, barring the public sector. When they're operating abroad, they're operating at the cutting edge of technology. And they say, we have problems working at cutting edge in India. That's an argument I am unwilling to buy. Okay, it may be costlier to do that, but they have done the shift, so the capabilities exist. It's a question of giving them the nudge and pushing in that direction. Also, how do you substitute when if it is a part of the chemical process itself? You have to move to green hydrogen. And I think green hydrogen in the scenarios you will see later forms a significant part of energy for industry. That is the substitute for coal. Now, this green hydrogen currently doesn't exist. We have a green hydrogen mission. A lot is happening. But if you see the scale of the problem, we are only touching the tip of the iceberg. The amounts are, again, very, very large. I will not preempt the presentation. I think that is there. So, over the years, and the last point I'll say as far as this is concerned, that fossil fuels will still be a significant part, almost 1/4 of industry consumption, even in 2070. And that will have to be handled through, like mentioned yesterday, carbon capture and other technologies. Coming to transportation, that's probably going to be the easier one. But again, the whole thing hinges on 2 basic principles. A, modal shift. India, it's a tragedy that, road has completely dominated rail, even for freight, where actually rail is far more suitable. So we need to do a modal shift, and nothing dramatic is being projected. We are talking of shifting modal freight to 30% to railways. I mean, it used to be 40% even 25 years ago. It's actually shrunk. So actually we need to do that, which actually means a huge change in the way the railways functions, the capacities it has to, take both passengers as well as freight. So a modal shift followed by electrification of the entire transport mobility ecosystem, both as far as rail is concerned and also road is concerned. There will still be some residual carbon here because aircraft would still have issues, shipping would still have issues, but I think that's the sum and substance. Lastly, the 4th report which we're covering today is critical minerals. So the good thing is, as we go out to 2070, our oil imports are going to shrink and our critical mineral imports are going to rise. So that's a large story, but the fine print there is the import shrinkage is going to far, far exceed the increase in imports. So we are actually going to become far better off with far lower imports in terms of dollar terms or rupee terms. So actually, green transition is good for our trade balance, extremely good. What's the problem? You remove one dependency, you create another dependency. You move the dependency from oil to critical minerals, and that is the crux of the problem. And the sad part is, we are well off in certain mineral resources. We are not so well off in certain other critical mineral resources. That comes out. We may have aspirations to produce everything in India, but it won't. So what does it mean? It means strengthening your mineral processing companies, acquiring mines abroad, strengthening organizations like Kabel, OVL, etc., and then aggressively pursue acquisition of raw materials so that you become the processing hub. So I think this is a very simple strategy as far as critical minerals are concerned. This is the sum and substance of what these 4 reports account for. They actually account for about 80% of the net zero pathway challenge. They are 80% of it. So they are the mega departments. What we see in the afternoon is the social aspects of it. We'll be looking at waste, we'll be looking at social implications, etc. But this is the meat, the central element in the green transition, the climate change issue relating to net zero. I'm sure this is a path-breaking endeavor. The roadmaps, as somebody said yesterday, I think in the afternoon, the professor from ISI said it. These are end of the day scenarios. Scenarios are not certainties. It's for us to choose which scenario we will end up in. And I think once it is there, they will be of immense use to policymakers, bureaucrats, departments, thinkers, think tanks, industry, everybody to take informed decisions. Today we get a lot of proposals. This is very good for reducing carbon emissions. How good? We have never looked at that. So a lot of things are past. It's very generic, you know. So I think from generic, we are now moving to specific. So next time somebody says, you know, subsidize these next 5,000 buses which are EVs, the question is going to be, okay, how much is it part of the solution, or is it just going off track, you know? So I think there is a cost-benefit analysis which comes out of these scenarios. And thank you very much, and I thank all my colleagues for coming over for this important occasion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sir Shri BVR Subramaniam ji, CEO NITI Aayog, for your remarks, for your address. And now for the presentation, may I invite Dr. Anjali Jain from NITI Aayog.
Good morning, everyone. Today, I will present key insights from our sectoral analysis covering 4 major sectors: power, transport, industry, and critical minerals, and how these sectors come together in long-term transition pathways of India. This work comes out sorry. So, next is not, yeah. So this work comes out of various interministerial efforts to develop 2 pathways, a current policy scenario and a net zero scenario to 2070. The total reports that we are going to develop, that we have developed is total 11, and we have already launched the 3 yesterday. And in this session, we are going to release 4 reports on transport, industry, power, and critical minerals. The objective is very clear: maintain growth and development while structurally reducing the emissions. This is the complete methodology of the different models that we have incorporated. Venu yesterday have already summarized it very briefly, and you can take the reference of the report where it is detailed out. So I would like to start from the first sector, that is transport sector, including both the passenger and freight transport. This is the first slide which gives the benchmark with the other countries where India stands. So India still had a very relatively low passenger per capita. So there is a huge potential to grow and expand the mobility demand in India. In our scenario, in the net zero scenario and current policy scenario, we are increasing and saturating up to a level of Italy and France. We are not reaching up to the level of US, considering that US has a large geographical area and high road dependency on the mobility sector. So India, because having the compressed area and high population, the saturation comes at around 14,000 kilometers per capita in current policy scenario and 12,000 per capita in net zero scenario. This is a very important result that I want to show that how the transition in the transport sector is occurring. So as CEO sir has also emphasized, in the transport sector, the major role will be the modal shift. In our current policy scenario and net zero scenario, there is a mass transit from the road to the rail system. In the net zero scenario, we have also aligned with the national rail plan of reaching 18 billion passenger kilometer by 2051 as compared to 6.8 billion passenger current. This also, there is a shift towards the metro also, and the plans aligns with the government announcement of increasing metro length to 5,000 kilometer by 2047 as compared to 1,000 kilometer current. In the freight transport also, there is a greater shift towards the rail from 22% current to the 30% by 2070. In the net zero scenario. This also aligns with the recent announcement of the budget, which talks about the increasing dedicated rail freight corridors. The second slide I want to emphasize on the fuel mix or the final energy demand of the transport. Here you can see that there is a major difference between the energy demand of the current policy scenario and the net zero scenario. This decrease in the net zero scenario is because of two major reasons. One is the transient-oriented development considered in the net zero scenario, where the demand of the passenger kilometer and the freight kilometer itself is lower than the current policy scenario. And the second, because of the efficiency improvement, because of the technology shift to the electricity mobility, which is 3 to 4 times higher efficient than the conventional fuel technology. You can see in this fuel mix that 50% is electricity and the green hydrogen. That green hydrogen, especially in the commercial vehicles and the shipping sector, and the electrification majorly for the road transport. The biofuel also has the 23% share comprising ethanol, bio-CNG, and the SAF. Here you can see that there is still a significant portion of the fossil fuel remaining in the 2070, majorly because of the aviation and the shipping sector. So the policy package of the transport sector comprises, we have to move from the people to the mass transit, shift from the road to the rail and the metro and the mass transit system of the rail. Then in the freight also, moving goods from road to the rail and pipelines. The third is electrification, and the fourth is building circularity in standards for the battery reuse and the second life applications. Then I would like to start with the next sector, industry sector. Before starting, I would like to tell that in our study, we have taken 9 industry subsectors separately and deep dive for their low carbon transition. There is a detailed analysis presented in the report of industry sector. The remaining sectors, which are low energy consuming sectors, we have comprised in one other industry. I would like to start that in every sector, across all the industry subsectors, the demand is increasing and then saturating. But there is different levers of the transition for every kind of the industry. So I want to take the example of 2 key sectors. First, the steel sector, where I would like to emphasize that there is a scope of energy efficiency to reach up to the global benchmark of 25 to 30%. So as sir also said that there is the first lever improving the energy efficiency. So in steel sector, there is a scope to improve the energy efficiency. The second lever is technology shift from the BF, BOF and coal-based DRI to the green hydrogen-based DRI. So in 2070, you can see there is a 50% green hydrogen as a fuel share in the total final energy consumption of the steel sector. Then the third lever is the use of the scrap. So the 2070 demand, the 40% of that is met by the scrap in the steel sector. While in the cement sector, there is a different kind of transition, because in cement sector, we have already achieved the global benchmark of the energy efficiency. In cement sector, almost 70% emissions are the process emissions. And there is no other solution than reducing the clinker factor itself in the cement sector. So use of the blended cement and the new technology like LC3, we have projected that the clinker factor can reduce from 0.67 current to the 0.55 by 2070. Then there are other kind of levers using the reduced derived fuel in the fuel mix, and also leveraging the waste heat recovery kind of system for the cement sector. If I talk about the final energy consumption of the industry, there are 4 major things. First, demand electrification. In industry sector, the current electrification is 16%, and in 2070 it is going to reach to 52%. Then the role of green hydrogen, especially to the hard-to-abate sector, steel refinery and the fertilizer. Third thing I want to emphasize the role of coal, that is going to significantly decline by 2070 in the net zero scenario. However, the petroleum product will remain by 2070 also, majorly serving the feedstock for the petrochemical industries. The policy package includes low-hanging fruits, improving energy efficiency, promote circularity, especially in the steel, aluminium, and in the cement sector by reduced derived fuel. Third, electrification of the industrial demand. The fourth is strengthening the international competitiveness. Now I would like to start the third sector, that is the power sector, which is the backbone of low carbon transition of all the other sectors. Before starting the power sector, I would like to tell that we have used the two different models for the power sector analysis because it is a very critical sector. So we have taken the support of Central Electricity Authority, and I heartily thank Chairperson of CEA and the complete modeling team for their support of the analysis. We have taken two tools and we have aligned the inputs in terms of the total electricity demand going to the model and other assumptions. And we have analyzed that the two models give the similar kind of the trajectory, which strengthen the robustness of the output. So as you can see that electricity consumption, including the captive and non-captive, going to increase sharply. As yesterday, Venu also emphasized that electrification of the end-use sector is going to increase from current 21% to 60% by 2070. So it is almost more than 8 times that we are going to consume electricity by 2070. But I want to emphasize that there is a greater shift how the sectors are consuming the electricity. So if you can see that 32% current share of the building is going to decrease to 13% by 2070. The quantum is increasing, but the share is decreasing. One, because of the efficiency improvement in the appliances and the building efficiency. Second, there are new emerging sectors of the electricity. One, green hydrogen. We are reaching production of green hydrogen 50 million ton by 2070. Second, data center, which is currently for the representation included in the miscellaneous and data center, going to 9% share. Then the electrification of the transport sector. So the share is increasing from 2% to 8% almost. Now I want to emphasize one more thing, that there is one more change that's going to happen in the electricity, that is increasing the gap between the capacity and the generation. The way we are currently generating the electricity is from the fossil fuel, where we have the good plant load factor, good utilization factor. But in future, the technology which are renewable, solar and wind, have very low utilization factor. So the same amount of generation will require the huge amount, almost 3 times of the capacity. So there is a huge increment in the capacity from almost 555 current in the 2025, including the captive and non-cap and the utility. We are going to increase it more than 7,000 gigawatt. That means almost 13 times increase. That major role is played by the solar and wind, which are variable, intermittent. So we need the support of some flexible devices, something like battery energy storage or pumped hydro storage. But there is again the competitiveness occurs. So we have 4-hour storage, competitive enough, but for the long duration storage, we still dependent how the market cost will decline of these technology. So currently there is a major role of the coal up to, I would say, 2045. The coal will remain, will serve the baseload power, will provide the flexibility, and will meet the rising electricity demand. But again, there is a role of nuclear in future that is going to emphasize. By 2047, we have target to reach 100 gigawatt of nuclear, and in our projection, by 2070, we are reaching 320 gigawatt. There is a major capacity remaining in the net zero scenario of the coal, 145 to 160 gigawatt almost, that will serve as a reserve capacity that will not active, but will be required if there is a flexibility or grid stability requirement is there. Two important indicators, grid emission factor, almost near to 0 by 2017 net zero scenario. Per capita electricity going to reach almost 10,000 kilowatt hour per capita, reaching almost at the level of US and South Korea. The major package includes nuclear to be scaled to 100 gigawatt by 2047 and 300 gigawatt by 2070. Expanding commissioning of RE projects, especially land neutral solution, rooftop, agri-PV, floating solar, locating the solar wind, that will again reduce the requirement of the land. Third, improving grid reliability. In that, I want to emphasize promote storage through the market-based incentives, something like some price signal for them, TOD kind of structure, or ancillary service market. The fourth is distribution reform. Urgent need to transform DISCOMs into viable business entities. The fourth sector is the critical mineral. So Ministry of Mines has announced 30 critical minerals. That includes the almost 51 independent minerals, including the rare earth elements and the platinum group elements. Out of those 51, we have taken 24 as a critical energy transition minerals, especially for the 7 key technologies. Those technology coming from the transport and the power sector, the projections we are taking from these two sectors, and we are assessing the demand of minerals in those key technology. Those demand, then we are assessing how can be fulfilled by the domestic resources from the recycling and how much import dependency will be there. So these are the 7 key technologies. We have analyzed different technologies in each category, considering the current market share and the technology readiness level in future, and how in future the market will change and their market share. This is a very important diagram that you will see in the report that gives the complete information about every minerals and in which technology they are being used with how much quantum and their requirement in different period of span. I have taken the snapshot of 4 key technologies. Here I want to emphasize about the copper, which is a very critical mineral in almost these 4 technology. Currently we have more than 90% dependence on the key minerals, and in the future, in the copper especially, we will be having 47% dependence. But if we have circularity kind of solution, so we have assessed circularity in the consumer electrical and electronics, and also telecommunication equipment, waste of those equipment, and we have seen that 20 to 25% copper and graphite demand could be met through the recycling. The major policy package in the critical minerals includes strengthening domestic exploration and mining, diversify international sources, scale circularity, strengthen institutional capacity. And in the last, just for the policy package of cross-sectoral, including all 4 sectors, I want to emphasize, first, sector-specific roadmaps are required. So NITI has already taken a major steps towards that segment by releasing 3 reports on aluminium, cement, and MSME. The second, mainstreaming circular economy pathway. Again, NITI has taken a major steps by releasing 3 reports, one on lithium ion, the second on end-of-life vehicles, and third on e-tire and e-waste. The third package is the systemic demand electrification. The fourth is strengthening domestic clean energy manufacturing. And because we are relying heavily on the technology which are currently not fully commercially viable, so there is the 5th lever of accelerating research, development, and innovation. In the last, I would like to say, if we execute on these levers in an integrated way, India can meet rising development demand while staying on track for its long-term net zero goals. This is not a single sector transition. It is a coordinated transformation of demand system, supply system, and industrial ecosystem. With coherent roadmaps and institutional execution, India can turn its net zero challenge into a competitive opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Anjali Jain, for this presentation. And now, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Anil Jain, Chairperson, Petroleum and Natural Gas Regulatory Board. Before I invite him, let me share a few things about him, few details. So, Dr. Anil Jain is an IS officer of 1986 batch. He has more than 2 decades of experience in energy, environment, and natural resource governance. He has served as secretary in the Ministry of Coal and Mines, led key national initiatives such as the India Energy Security Scenario and National Energy Policy. So now may I humbly request Dr. Anil Jain ji to kindly share his perspective with us.
Shri BVRS Subramaniam, colleagues on the dais, august members of the audience, Dr. Kirit Parikh. Let me at the outset congratulate NITI Aayog for this fantastic initiative, which all of us thought was missing in the country for the last, the last energy comprehensive report was done in 2008 when Dr. Kirit Parikh was member of the Planning Commission. So that document, the expert committee report of the integrated energy policy, became some kind of a Bible for the ministries and for the Planning Commission, then later NITI Aayog. So with this initiative of putting all these reports together, all the knowledge together, I think NITI Aayog has filled in a big vacuum. I served in this institution for 5 years, and I know the huge convening power, and that was something which BVRS has put together, and I must congratulate him and his team, particularly Anshu, Bhardwaj, Rajnath, and others. I particularly notice the large young crowd in this hall. So we have a future to build, and these reports are basically aimed at that. And it is you people who will be really shaping that future. So all this knowledge being created, disseminated, discussed, put together, it augurs very well for the country. Coming to the subject at hand, it was an honor to be asked to chair this committee. First, when Anshu came to see me, I asked him that I've never served in a transport ministry because Alok was chosen to do power. So he said that, sir, you have done modeling. ISS is something which we are all very proud of and very happy to see that it has been the basic model which has been used to create the projections. So I took it as a challenge. It was difficult to move along, but with the support of the very strong team from the energy, not the vertical, but the division, and Venu in particular. So we were able to navigate. You see, transport sector is one where you have very strong service provider ministries, all the civil aviation, shipping, transport, railways. And you also have the suppliers, or so to say, the fuel providers, which is the petroleum, power, MNRE. CBG has huge relationships with the agriculture ministry, biotechnology. So transport is indeed a little challenging and complex setup for the country as a whole. But with the close coordination of everybody, I'm very happy to say that by and large, everybody was on board. And that is why I again say the convening strength of the NITI Aayog. Normally sectoral ministries, in the past we have seen that if you try to put more burden of passenger transport on the railways, they would object, because we all know that passenger transport is a losing proposition in terms of finances. So railways would find it tough because they have to keep enhancing the tariff on the freight, which again meets with obstructions. So I'm very happy, and I want to thank, basically I did the consolidation, but it is the think tanks, several of them whose names I think are there on the report, who all put in this knowledge together. Now, I worked in the energy sector, I continue to work in that. Energy sector is marked by a very common phrase, the trilemma of affordability, sustainability, and energy security. In the case of India, energy security basically is characterized by supply security, because we have huge import dependence. Thankfully, in coal we are out of import dependence, but for coking coal it's still there. But for nuclear fuels, for oil, it's almost 87%. Gas is inching upwards 52, 53%. So these are the three characteristics of energy policy debate. When I look at the transport sector, I find a lot of commonality with one substitution. I think the affordability challenge is common to transport. The sustainability challenge we have all spoken of, Subramaniam spoke about, the electrification of transport demand amongst others. The supply security, which in the case of energy, is plentifully available. I mean, even the global markets are well provided. And if you move to solar and wind, we have more than what we need. But in the case of transport, availability of transport services is a challenge. So that is one substitution which goes into that trilemma. Even if the transport services become available, the question of choices and options remain. Does a commuter have a choice of taking a train or taking a metro or taking any other means of public transport? So this is something which has characterized the work of this committee. The numbers we just saw on the presentation, I noted it here. Even in the net zero scenario, between 2025 and 2070, the passenger transport demand in terms of BP, billion passenger kilometers, is going to go up from 6,000 to 20,000 billion passenger kilometers, which is 3.3x increase in 2070. And in the freight sector, it's going to go up from, in 2025, it is assumed to be 4,000 billion transport kilometers. It is expected to go up by 3.2x to 13,000 billion tons kilometers. So for an economy like India, where provision of services, creation of infrastructure, all that is still a challenge. And of course, if you move to electrification, we just saw, it was interesting to see that even in nickel, we are almost 100% import dependent. Now, in those circumstances, the choices before the policymakers get limited. Can we sacrifice affordability for sustainability when we have to make availability the number one factor? And these challenges, they continue to be different, but every country faces them. Affordability, which is, of course, a big challenge for India, continues to be a challenge for developed countries. We all know the case of Germany, which moved into renewables very fast, and then they say that they have a high-cost economy in front of them. In UK, we all know that in the electricity sector, the Ofgem, the regulator there, keeps putting, the top ceilings for the household bills. And even though these countries claim to be the champions of private markets and competition, still for affordability, they need to intervene in the markets. So this is the challenge which the transport sector faces. And when we were doing this report, even the manufacturing sector was always trying to talk of subsidies, etc., and saying that, there should be some preference given in the report to, let's say, somebody was saying hybrid, somebody was saying full electric, but we steered clear of that. So in a way, this sector has challenges both on the ends of the dynamics, and I'm sure that this report will help to take it forward. Now, going forward, I have two remarks to make. One is that transport sector, like any other sector, has lots of open questions. So while this report tries to put them together, I think the report raises more questions than it answers. It tries to put everything together in one place and gives an optimal way forward. We saw Anjali make a presentation. And these are, the considerations which the policymakers wish to have. So net zero scenario we constructed, and we said this is the way forward to achieve it. But then to make it possible, you will need a lot of policy interventions and lots of choices to be made. So those questions, I would recommend that detailed integrated modeling studies should be done, and sectoral pieces should be gone into for detail. And the second thing is, of course, which is not new, implementation challenge will always remain. So I was just looking at the presentation of the energy mix into the net zero scenario and CPS and NZS. Between the last 15, 20 years, only one new kid has arrived on the horizon, and that is hydrogen. The rest, all the solutions, nuclear, CBG, solar, wind, all of them have remained on the menu plate in the last 15, 20 years. And the nation has done a lot. We have progressed so much in wind and solar. They have now been mainstreamed. Otherwise, MNRE and these things were, generally spoken about, but people are not very serious about it. Everybody thought that the large doses of energy which India needs probably cannot come from wind and solar, coal, oil and gas. But now we are looking at these sources as the future energy security agenda. So the implementation challenge remains with the ministries, and that is where I would recommend that NITI Aayog, the fervor with which it has got these reports prepared, it must go forward to get buying in from the ministries. Unless the ministries buy into these reports, they will be, NITI Aayog and Planning Commission produce many reports. This should not end up in like that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Anil Jain ji. We have Shri Alok Kumar ji, former Secretary, Ministry of Power with us. He is an IS officer of the Uttar Pradesh cadre of 1988 batch. He has over 35 years of experience in public policy and economic development. He has led wide-ranging power sector reforms. He managed one of the world's largest power systems, chaired the G20 Energy Transitions Working Group, and also served as CEO of the Uttar Pradesh Power Corporation. May I request Shri Alok Kumar ji to kindly grace us with your remarks.
Very good morning. Respected CEO NITI Aayog and my senior Shri Dr. Anil Jain ji, my colleague on the dais and distinguished eminent personalities in the hall. A good, heavy presentation has been made, and there's very little to speak after Dr. Anil Jain sahab. I'll make some very light points to make the atmosphere lighter. Say, during the working group, we got a wonderful support from CA and NITI Aayog team. We ran several models, and I think models are being run and will be run. So, models are, as CEO was saying, that they are the scenarios. What emerges, whatever you run the model, whatever assumptions, renewable energy is the least cost path for India. Second important message I want to leave here is the technology cost, which is the input to the model. And what we are seeing, technology costs are also favoring renewables, both the solar and batteries. And unfortunately, they are going against the nuclear and coal. If you see the capital cost being discovered for the new coal plants and capital cost for nuclear plants, they are on the other side. They are on the other side, where the solar and batteries are on the positive side. So that will be the destiny for India's power sector in going forward. The next point which I want to make is, the model has pushed till 2030 the 500 gigawatt goal. So it has raised some cost. But thereafter, we did not force the emissions till 2070 in the current policy scenario. And the result is that the costs, they start coming down. So key message is, don't chase targets blindly. Calibrate your RA targets in sync with what your demand growth is. If you chase targets ahead of your demand, you will increase your cost. And keep in mind the state-specific situations. There are states which will face very heavy cost if you push uniform RCO targets. I make the fourth point. Whatever scenarios, the government policy will play a central role. There are 4 areas in which the government policy will be very, very important for deciding the destiny of the power sector of India. First is the imperatives of diversity and energy independence, keeping in the geopolitical scenario. And that's why we are talking of nuclear and coal, but they are not least cost solution. Second is your desire to reach net zero. I don't know, the 2070 is far away, how hard you will push and how hard you should push. Because it leaves a lot of stranded assets if you push net zero. And it increases cost by either retirement of plants or by using technology like CCUS. The third imperative is the system operations imperatives. The type of inertia support we'll get from batteries is yet to be seen. There is a conventional inertia need, but there are talks of synthetic inertia. I don't know what technology has in future. And fourth important area where government policy will be important is electrification. CEO NITI Aayog spoke about electrification, But sir, I don't see that happening. We assume something, and NITI Aayog has been saying that the share of electricity will go double by 2047. I don't see that happening. So policy will play a very central role. Electric vehicles are not going up as we wanted. Next message I want to leave here is power sector. I was part of it. Pankaj is now part of it. There will be many power secretaries. We have to better anticipate and plan. The rush for batteries now, I think I'm also responsible for that. We should have anticipated better 2-3 years ago. Nothing lost, lessons. Our demand is growing. The whole power sector community has to better anticipate and plan what is there in 2030 or 2035. Because the crisis for storage, I think now we are facing it gives us a lot of lessons. Next point I want to make is, so far resource adequacy has been spoken of only generation. This has led to high transmission costs for India. We have written very clearly in the report, resource adequacy has to take all 4, generation, transmission, storage, demand response together. Demand response is important because peakiest demand comes for 200 hours in a year. If you set up a plant for those 200 hours, you are going to kill your consumers. My next point is minimize distortions. These transmission waivers or net metering, they are good as a toffees for the children, not for adults. If you keep on giving the transmission waivers and net metering, it will increase cost, it will cause a lot of distortions. What is cheaper may become costlier. So give limited VGF to only strategic technologies and withdraw them fast as soon as the child grows to adult. Discom viability, I think we have spoken a lot, but one point I would like to make, we should congratulate Ministry of Power that AT&C loss have come down to 15%, but remember, global benchmark is 7.5%. And the success lies in smart metering. You can improve billing efficiency by 4% in 2 years. You can reach 11%. One more point is affordability. While we require certainty for the investors, we should not touch old PPAs, but we should think very seriously about the new PPAs. Current PPA structures are big no in my view. If you stay with them, whole demand risk is being given to discoms. World over, you screen the world markets, nowhere you have 25-year long PPA. That 20 years or 15 years. I spoke to Secretary MNRE, and he kindly agreed he will look at it for 20 years. We must immediately reduce the duration of PPA. 25-year PPA gives huge demand risk to discoms, and they are facing. We have to go market way. I quote one data from IA recently, a book has come on electricity markets. The share of electricity in the long-term PPAs is only 10% in USA and 12% in Australia. India has 85%. It is not doable. We must move to shorter tenure PPAs and more share to markets. Market ensures cost-effective dispatch and scheduling. We are missing on that. And one last point is fair allocation of costs. As we go more of open access, more of C&I consumers, more of rooftops, we must look at the fair allocation of cost of distribution network. Otherwise, affordability will remain to be a challenge and it will be a barrier for new technologies to come. And I must once again congratulate for the wonderful work done by NITI Aayog in bringing these reports, and I got wonderful support. This report is only an attempt to do some modeling, but modeling are only scenarios. Whatever I have said, in my view, if we keep those points in view, I think power sector's future is very, very bright. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Shri Alok Kumar ji. Ladies and gentlemen, Shri Pankaj Agarwal ji, Secretary, Ministry of Power is with us, and he's an IS officer of the Madhya Pradesh cadre, 1992 batch, with extensive experience across infrastructure, defense, industry, and public finance. May I humbly request Shri Pankaj Agarwal ji for the address.
CEO NITI Aayog, Shri BVR Subramaniam ji, Shri Anil Jain ji, Dr. Kirit Parekh, distinguished colleagues on the dais, colleagues in the audience. डॉक्टर सुब्रमण्यम साहब, डॉक्टर अनिल जैन और आलोक कुमार साहब के कहने के बाद अब तो बहुत कुछ बचा नहीं है जो मैं आपके सामने रखूं। मैं बात वहाँ से शुरू करता हूँ, एनर्जी ट्राइलेमा से, जो डॉक्टर अनिल जैन ने अपने उद्बोधन में कहा, और आलोक कुमार जी ने भी उसको एक तरीके से कहा जाए कि उस पर फोकस किया कि हमारे देश को अफोर्डेबल एनर्जी की ज़रूरत है। आई विल हियर आफ्टर लिमिट माई submission to electricity, which is right now just 22% of the energy basket, and is what we aspire is reach up to 40% of the energy basket by the time we reach 2047. एक अच्छी बात यह है कि आज renewable energy backed with storage is now standing somewhere in competition with the conventional sources which were dispatchable in nature. So there is a fundamental change which we are perceiving now, and maybe like in 3 to 5 years time we may be actually realizing the economies of scale going forward, जहाँ पे एक बड़ा मुश्किल हो जाएगा हमारे लिए चूज़ करना कि बेस लोड कैपेसिटी वर्सेस डिस्पैचेबल रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी, हाउ एग्जैक्टली वी आर गोइंग टू लाइक डिसाइड द मिक्स ऑफ। एक इस पूरी ट्रांजिशन में सबसे इम्पॉर्टेंट ये रहेगा कि हमारी यूटिलिटीज़ मजबूत रहें, फाइनेंशियली स्ट्रांग रहें। आलोक कुमार जी ने बताया कि एक अच्छा चेंज, एक टर्निंग पॉइंट नज़र में आ रहा है कि अब हम ओवरऑल ऑल डिस्कॉम्स टुगेदर हैव बिकम नेट पॉजिटिव, मीन्स 2701 करोड़ का टोटल प्रॉफिट उन्होंने रिपोर्ट किया है, पब्लिक एंड प्राइवेट डिस्कॉम्स टुगेदर। The public discoms are still in the loss of roughly 11 to 12,000 crores, and the private discoms are in the profit. So, like if you add the two, then together it becomes net profit. But more important is now we need to actually sustain this momentum. It should act actually as a turning point, and going forward, the distribution companies should remain in the pink of health in the long run. आलोक कुमार साहब ने इशू रेज़ किया कि हम सारी डिमांड रिस्क डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन कंपनीज़ की ओर पोस्ट कर रहे हैं बाय वर्चू ऑफ लॉकिंग देम अप इन दी वेरी लॉन्ग टर्म PPAs, 25 years and more duration. This is surely an area of concern. और गोइंग फॉरवर्ड मैं ये नहीं कहूँगा कि हम US के लेवल पे पहुँच पाएंगे 10% और 90% मार्केट पे डिस्पैच पे। यूरोप में भी इस पर बहुत कोशिश हुई थी कि हम मार्केट बेस्ड डिस्पैच बढ़ाते चले जाएं और लॉन्ग टर्म PPAs को कम करते जाएं, लेकिन एक वक्त ऐसा भी आया जब उनके यहाँ नई कैपेसिटी ऐड होने में तकलीफ़ होने लग गई, और उसके कई ऑल्टरनेटिव्स उन्होंने निकाले, चाहे कैपेसिटी मार्केट्स कह लें, चाहे कॉन्ट्रैक्ट फॉर डिफरेंस कह लें। यू नीडेड अ काउंटर पार्टी टू मोबिलाइज द इन्वेस्टमेंट इन द सेक्टर। We also aspire to bring in an intermediary, start the contract for difference, open up the sector for the C&I segment so that they can directly engage in procurement of their power without incurring the huge cost on account of the surcharges. Rationalization of tariff is surely on the cards, like their national electricity policy talks about it, that the fixed charge must gradually reflect the sunk cost, the cost of infrastructure, the cost of the contracts actually, which the distribution utility has already engaged in. I'm really glad that NITI has charted out this pathway, and I thank the chair of the Power Committee, the Transport Committee who are present here, and all the other chairs who have done this due diligence, and the entire NITI team. Will surely try to work on this pathway. Of course, we will divide the pathway into multiple milestones, multiple roadmaps. And right now what we have before us is the roadmap till the 2030 and 2032. They are the two roadmaps that we immediately have. We have a target of 500 gigawatt of renewable non-fossil energy capacity, and similarly we have certain targets for 2032. So right now our focus will be on that, but yes, for the long-term perspective, we'll keep this pathway in our mind. The pathway will also continuously evolve with the changes in technology and the cost structures and the market structure. So I thank NITI for this wonderful job, and thank you so much for being patient. Thank you.
Thank you, Shri Pankaj Agarwal ji, Secretary, Ministry of Power, for your remarks. And now, ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker, Shri Santosh Sarangi ji, Secretary, Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. He's an IS officer of the Odisha cadre 1994 batch, currently also serving as Chairman and Managing Director of the Solar Energy Corporation of India Limited. May I sincerely request Shri Santosh Sarangi ji for his address.
CEO NITI Aayog, Mr. BVR Subramaniam, Chairman of PNGRB, Mr. Jain, Mr. Alok Kumar, Mr. Pankaj Agarwal, Secretary Power, Mr. Rajnath Ram, Mr. Upadhyay, and distinguished guests. At the outset, let me compliment NITI Aayog for coming out with such a comprehensive report and such a cross-sectoral report, assimilating all of it, interacting with so many ministries, and coming up with a roadmap for 2070 is a phenomenal job. And I thank the CEO and his entire team, including Mr. Anshu Prakash, Mr. Ram, and others, for having come out with such a wonderful roadmap. This provides us with a roadmap till 1970, and it is on us, the departments, to now make sense out of it and work towards achieving that ambition. In this context, the journey of renewable energy has been a phenomenal journey, and it provides some implication of how India has done the green transition by looking at the cost of transition and development and growth as not something which is mutually exclusive, but which is mutually inclusive. And over a period of time, the policy lessons in RE transition is something which will guide us further. If we look at the past, this 500 gigawatt ambition by 2030 by Honorable Prime Minister is something which provided the investors, the policymakers, with a lot of policy certainty. And that has driven the rapid deployment of capacity, and along with that, rapid investment in manufacturing. So both of these, deployment as well as manufacturing, is something which has gone hand in hand and has also enabled us to reach a stage where our import dependency is significantly reducing when it comes to solar modules today. We have seen rapid decline in import of modules, and we are also looking forward to similar levels in future as we grow in capacity in our cell manufacturing, in our ingot wafer manufacturing, and polysilicon manufacturing. At policy level also, significant steps have been taken to also provide protection to domestic industries, especially in nascent sectors. For example, when it comes to modules, we came up with the renewable purchase obligation, renewable consumption obligation, and ALMM for modules, for cells, and now we are going to come up with ALMM for ingot wafer to ensure that domestic industry is protected from dumping and dumping at very low margins. So from that perspective, recalibrating the policies to ensure that the manufacturing, domestic manufacturing progresses is something that we have done at scale in India. And today, when it comes to module manufacturing, we are the second largest module manufacturer in the world. So to sustain this, I think some of the points which CEO NITI Aayog mentioned in terms of keeping an eye open on technology, on innovation and R&D, is something that all of us must stay focused on. As I foresee, the renewable energies generation cost is only going to decline in future. Our lab level results in perovskite monojunction has shown a generation efficiency of 28%, and with silicon tandem, it has shown an efficiency of 34%. So with this kind of efficiency, our scientists are very confident that solar power can come at below 1 rupee cost in future. If not below 1 rupee, it can be 1 rupee 20 paise, 30 paise. But compared to today's 2 rupee 50 paise per unit, it can halve in future. Similarly, in battery energy storage system, a lot of experiment is happening. All of you are familiar with the rapid decline in cost in battery energy storage system, especially in lithium ion. But there are parallel activities going on with regard to sodium ion, with flow batteries. And I recently came across a flow battery manufacturer in UK, where the LCOE cost of vanadium flow batteries is now almost equal to lithium ion batteries. So in course of time, many of these flow battery technologies, molten salt technologies, heat storage systems, CSPs, all of us, it are going to provide multiple pathways for storage of energy and converting it back to electricity as and when it is required. So in terms of technology and innovation, there is an immense opportunity in future, and from that perspective, the predictions and modeling done by NITI Aayog, I believe, is quite accurate, and from that perspective, we must stay focused on the pathway that has been given. When it comes to RE, the integration of RE is an essential requirement. People have, when the presentation was being made by NITI Aayog, the issue of requirement of grid inertia, the issue of reactive power requirement, the issue of oscillation while injecting RE power into the grid, all of these are challenges. But there is no country in the world which is backing down on RE because of these challenges. Because there are technological solutions available, there are innovations available, and it is known that with right planning, and I must thank Mr. Alok Kumar for bringing that focus back, that anticipating the changes which are required in the system is key to our energy progress, energy pathway. And from that perspective, anticipating the kind of changes which are going to happen in the electricity sector is extremely crucial. In fact, the India energy stack is a significant disruptor in future, where prosumers, today's consumers, can become producers of electricity in future and can trade electricity with their neighbors. And that's going to be a significant disruptor to the entire energy scenario. So the point which the Secretary Power was making, that while all these changes are happening, ensuring that the utilities remain viable is also another balancing act which one will have to do. So I think in this, given the combined experience of people on the dais, off the dais in energy sector, I think the entire range of issues affecting energy sectors have been discussed. And I think the pathway provides us with both challenges and opportunities. And from the perspective of departments, we will commit to work with NITI Aayog and other stakeholders to ensure that India's net zero ambition is fulfilled in future. Thank you.
Thank you, Shri Santosh Sarangi ji. And now, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Padma Bhushan Dr. Viksit Saraswat ji, Member NITI Aayog. And may I request Ms. Poonam Kapoor ji, Research Officer NITI Aayog, to kindly felicitate Dr. Viksit Saraswat ji by presenting a sapling to him. And now our dignitaries on the dais will launch 4 NITI Aayog study reports. These reports are scenarios towards Viksit Bharat and Net Zero, Sectoral Insights Power. Scenario towards... Sir, let them bring the reports. So August dignitaries on the dais may kindly release NITI Aayog study reports. The first report is scenarios towards Viksit Bharat and Net Zero, Sectoral Insights Power. Our next report is on scenario towards Viksit Bharat and Net Zero, sectoral insights, industry. Our third report is scenarios towards Viksit Bharat and Net Zero, sectoral insights, transport. Dr. Anshu Bhardwaji, Program Director, NITI Aayog, is also with us on the dais. And our fourth and last report in this session is scenarios towards Viksit Bharat and Net Zero, sectoral critical mineral assessment, demand and supply. Thank you, respected dignitaries. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you, Anshu sir. Dr. V.K. Saraswat, who is a Padma Bhushan and member NITI Aayog. He is a distinguished scientist and former secretary, DRDO, with decades of leadership in defense, research, and strategic technologies. Dr. Saraswat has led major national programs spanning missiles, nuclear and cyber systems, supercomputing, and clean and alternative energy initiatives. May I sincerely request Padma Bhushan Dr. V.K. Saraswat ji to kindly address us. Sir.
Namaskar, good morning. My greetings to all the dignitaries on the dais, starting with my dear friend and colleague, Mr. Subramaniam, Secretary Power, Secretary MNRE, Alokji, one of the oldest in the game, and all my colleagues from NITI Aayog, Anshu, and others who have been part of this major event where NITI Aayog is trying to release the good work which has been done for the last about a year plus on major aspects of energy for different works, particularly energy as such for power, energy for transportation, energy for logistics, and the materials required for meeting the demands of all this. I think it's a very comprehensive compilation and lot of research work which has been done by them. So I would like to congratulate NITI Aayog team and all those who have been associated in this program. I also contributed to some extent as chairing 2 committees, if I'm not wrong. And it was a great learning exercise. I would put this way that India today stands at a transformative moment in its developmental journey. What was mentioned, because I missed the talk of all others, but I was there when Secretary MNRE was talking. It was a very comprehensive picture of what we have aimed at and where we are going. It's a comprehensive approach for meeting net zero and also meeting the demands which are arising from what we have today, something like 400 and installed capacity, 467 if I'm not wrong, to something like 900 in 2030 gigawatts. As we pursue the twin goals of becoming a developed nation with high income by 2047 and net zero by 2070, energy demand, as I mentioned to you, for power, industry, transport, building, agriculture, in a sustainable manner will play a decisive role. Because all of us know that development, for it to be called development, it is also linked with how much is the energy consumption. In fact, there was a definition which used to be given once upon a time. If you are developed, then you must be consuming more than 5,000 to 6,000 units per person per year. And we were all, I think, somewhere around 1,100 or so at that time. I do not know the latest figure, but I think it still needs to be, we have to still catch up. So as our economy grows, India's demand for materials energy and infrastructure will rise, and it is basically for lifting the living standards of more than 1.4 billion Indians. And energy guzzling sectors like power, industry and transport are both the driver of India's economic resurgence and a major contributor to the national greenhouse gas emissions. I'm just coming from a conference organized by IIT Delhi, where we were talking of decarbonization using carbon capture and utilization and hydrogen. And one of the major areas which came to the notice at that time, while hydrogen, green hydrogen particularly, is a major source for decarbonization, but as on today it is not affordable despite all the efforts what we are making under the National Green Hydrogen Mission and also other missions like solar energy, wind energy and so on. So at the heart of all these challenges lie the balancing rapid growth and climate stewardship. But within this challenge lies a profound opportunity also to shift to clean power, to electrify the processes, to adopt new fuels like hydrogen and unlock efficiency gains. In NITI Aayog, we have worked along with Department of Atomic Energy, Department of Power and others for developing efficient thermal power production system like advanced ultra supercritical, which will improve the efficiency from 38% to as high as 45 to 47% and bring down the emissions considerably. And if you integrate that with carbon capture and utilization or go into IGCC mode, the entire process will be very, very close to net carbon. But we are a country where 75% of the infrastructure that will be required in 2047 is yet to be built. The contours of clean energy revolution are already visible, but the requirement is to expedite the whole thing. I was just taking some numbers. I didn't have those numbers with me. Under the Green Hydrogen Mission, what is the total expenditure incurred so far? Unfortunately, the literature does not give that figure. I went to ChatGPT, I went to other sources. What came through these sources was a very small amount. That only shows the pace at which we are implementing the various programs. And our rapid expansion of renewables, the budget announcement of 20,000 crores for CCUS mission, Shanti Act 2025, together signal a bold technological shift. But all this shift will be of use if we are able to rapidly implement whatever is being planned. Suppose this 20,000 crores for CCUS has been done. I think it needs to be taken, it should not run into a similar speed like the coal gasification system has run. Coal gasification, my dear friend Anil Jainji is here. I think both of us worked for it. And I think it was in 2021 or 22, if I'm not wrong. And now it's about 5-6 years. And we are yet to get anything going in that particular area. In this particular study on interministerial working groups, one on industry and one on critical minerals, I have been partner to that. I find that industry sector accounts for nearly 24% of India's total greenhouse gas emissions as on 2022. Major emitters include steel, cement, aluminium, and fertilizers and other manufacturing. India's industrial low carbon transition rests on 4 structural pillars: energy efficiency, circularity, electrification, and clean fuel technologies. Under net zero, electrification driven by non-fossil power increases from 16% in 2025 to estimated about 55% by 2070. Green hydrogen enters as a critical fuel in low carbon transition in steel, refineries and fertilizers, rising from low base today to 42 million tons by 2070, which is rather low. So I would put it this way, that this journey to bring in hydrogen to decarbonize the difficult to abate sectors cannot be achieved unless we make major breakthroughs in reducing the cost of green hydrogen. That would require extensive effort on our part for upscaling the manufacturing of electrolyzers, reducing the cost of power, and also ensuring the integration with the grid in a more meaningful manner. By 2070, fossil fuels-based energy share declines to 26% compared to 83% today, and residual fuel dependent on capacity largely operates with carbon capture, utilization, and storage. India's circular economy is expected to reach almost $2 trillion and create 10 million jobs by 2050. Steel scrap utilization increases by 22% to 30% by 2050 and 40% by 2070, thereby reducing reliance on the energy-intensive ore-based smelting processes. In cement sector, clinker ratio is expected to lower from 0.67 in 2024 to 0.55 in 2070. So aluminum recycling serves almost about 40% of 2070 demand. Almost half of the industrial emissions reductions rely on new technologies such as green hydrogen, CCUS, SMRs, and high capex electrification solutions such as electricity boilers and heat pumps. The task before us now is to move from pilots and promise. My biggest problem is that in every sector, while there has been significant amount of demonstration of technologies in the laboratories, in some of the national laboratories, but at very, very small scale, we might have achieved about TRL 4 in many of the cases. But to jump from 4 to 7 or 8 and commercialize, there is a midstream which is essential for setting up mid-scale pilot plants to demonstrate the technology and establish the commercial viability. And hence, there's a need for us to make investment in that direction. Some of the programs which we have initiated, whether it is in the ANRF or it in the DST or in the MNRE, most of them are missing on this particular aspect. There is major investment needed in supporting the setting up of the pilot plants to the tune of 300 tons per day, 500 tons per day, and so on, whether it is coal gasification, whether it is production of electrolyzers or production of fuel cells, or even solar cells for that matter. Scale is important. The success of new technologies in clean energy, electricity, mobility, green hydrogen, and industrial transformation depends on secure, affordable, and sufficient access to critical minerals. We released just now the book, From Solar Panels and Wind Turbines, Batteries, Electric Vehicles to Electrolyzers. These technologies are inherently mineral intensive. Secretary Ebenari was mentioning about flow batteries working on vanadium. 55% of that is imported. That is the kind of a problem we have. And in fact, vanadium is not that critical in terms of availability as far as India is concerned, but still it is. But there are minerals which are not at all available. For example, the rare earth magnets. We have a serious problem. So cumulative critical energy transition minerals needs projected under net zero scenario are about 169 million tons. The demand for critical minerals is heavily backloaded with only 2% of cumulative demand occurring in 25-30, 32% in 30-50, and 66% between 2050 and 2070. This means that 2/3 of the total critical mineral requirements materialize only after 2050. Therefore, planning must front-load exploration, processing, circularity, and strategic sourcing. EVs and battery storage systems together dominate future critical mineral demand, accounting for approximately 55% and 5% respectively, with concentrated mineral requirements like graphite, lithium, nickel, phosphorus, cobalt, and vanadium. Solar photovoltaic generates the second highest demand with a share of about 31% driven by silicon and copper, with additional strategic exposure to gallium, germanium, tellurium, and advanced PV variants. EV motors and wind energy hinge on rare earths such as neodymium, rhodium, dysprosium, and terbium for permanent magnets. Copper and graphite emerge as the critical minerals with the highest cumulative demand by 2070 at roughly 66 million tons and 46.4 million tons under the net zero scenario. Copper's dominance reflects its widespread application across solar, PV, wind turbines, EV, and EV motors and electrolyzers. Graphite and demand arises almost entirely from battery anodes, with more than 95% coming from EV and battery energy storage systems. Minerals such as nickel, we hardly have any stocks for that. Lithium, cobalt, and rare earth elements show high cumulative demand. No reserves, near complete import dependence, almost 100%. These materials are essential for battery storage, electrolyzers, and wind technologies. So this raises a fundamental question. Will the energy transition simply replace today's fossil fuel dependencies with a new set of critical mineral dependencies? This is a question we have to answer. Global supply chains for critical minerals are highly concentrated. Over-reliance on a narrow set of external supplies could expose India to price volatility, supply disruptions, and strategic vulnerabilities, undermining both economic resilience and energy security. So choices made today will determine how we strengthen India's critical minerals ecosystem for a secure, sustainable, and self-reliant development pathway. We need to accelerate domestic exploration and processing capabilities. We have just developed a process of making rare earth materials from red mud, but the research took us 4 years. If this is the speed at which we are going to do, I think we will be lagging significantly. We have to develop a robust circular economy system, advance R&D, and deepen international partnerships. Dedicated rare earth mineral corridors have to be set up, and basic customs duty exemptions on capital goods for critical minerals processing and the launch of national critical mission are steps in this direction. So these reports which are launched today provide strategic insights and roadmaps for call to action. They distill evidence, technological pathways, and policy options into a comprehensive framework to make our country, our economy more productive, more competitive, and more sustainable. Implementing their recommendations, I'm highlighting this word implementing, expeditiously can offer the world a powerful example of green growth in practice, and India could be an example to the whole world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your address. Ladies and gentlemen, Padma Bhushan Dr. V.K. Saraswati, member NITI Aayog. And now for word of thanks, I would invite Shri Manoj Upadhyay ji, Deputy Advisor, Energy.
Respected dignitaries and participants to this event, as we conclude the launch of Forest Report on scenarios towards Viksit Bharat and net zero focused on power, industry, transport, and critical minerals, it is my honor to extend a heartfelt vote of thanks. First and foremost, I express our deep gratitude to Dr. V.K. Saraswat, member NITI Aayog, for his inspiring remarks. We thank CEO NITI Aayog for providing valuable perspectives. He has been a constant guiding source to us in NITI Aayog on each and every counts. We extend our sincere thanks to Dr. Anil Jain sir, Sri Pankaj Agarwal sir, Sri Santosh Sarangi sir, Sri Alok Kumar sir, for sparing their valuable time and joining us in the launch program. A special thanks to Dr. Anjali Jain for presenting the reports that form the centerpiece of this event. We are grateful to Sri Rajnath sir for setting the tone with his opening remarks. We are also thankful to Dr. Anshu Bharadwaj for his insightful contribution and consistent guidance in compilation of the reports. I also wish to acknowledge the effort of our team at NITI Aayog and all partners institutions who dedicatedly make this report possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shri Manoj Upadhyay ji, and with this, we wrap up our first session. May I request all our esteemed dignitaries to kindly come forward for the group photograph, please. Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, may I request you all to please remain seated because now we'll have a panel discussion. So we are going to start. Technology, infrastructure, and minerals, building blocks of net zero. So this is the theme of our panel discussion. And the panel will examine sector-specific transition pathways for power, industry, and transport. Experts will discuss technology choices, timelines, and implementation challenges, the role of critical minerals in enabling clean energy systems will also be highlighted, and the discussion will focus on coordinated action across sectors to achieve net zero. May I request our esteemed panelists to kindly join us on the dais. Shri Suman Berry ji, Vice Chairperson, NITI Aayog. So I'm requesting all our esteemed panelists to kindly join us on the dais. Shri Suman Berry ji, Vice Chairperson, NITI Aayog. Shri Suman Sinha ji, CEO, Renew Power. Shri Rajat Gupta ji, Senior Partner, McKinsey. Shri Deepak Arora ji, Head Government Relations, ArcelorMittal Nippon Steel India. And moderator of this session, Shri O.P. Agarwal ji, Distinguished Fellow, NITI Aayog. Okay. Again, sir? Ji, okay. May I humbly request all our esteemed panelists of this discussion to kindly come up on the dais. Shri Suman Berry ji, Vice Chairperson, NITI Aayog. We are requesting you, sir, to kindly join us on the dais. Shri Suman Sinha ji, CEO, Renew Power. Shri Rajat Gupta ji, Senior Partner, McKinsey. Shri Deepak Arora ji, Head Government Relations, ArcelorMittal Nippon Steel India. And Shri O.P. Agarwal ji, Distinguished Fellow, NITI Aayog, who will moderate this session. Ladies and gentlemen, Vice Chairperson, NITI Aayog, Shri Suman Berry ji. He is a distinguished policy economist, previously served as Global Chief Economist at Royal Dutch Shell, as Director General of National Council of Applied Economic Research. He also held key advisory roles as member of the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council. May I invite Ms. Afsha Amir to come and kindly felicitate Shri Suman Berry ji by presenting a sapling to him. Ms. Afsha Amir is now presenting a planter to Shri Suman Berry-ji. Our next panelist of this discussion is Shri Suman Sinha-ji. He is the founder, chairman, and CEO of ReNew, one of India's largest clean energy companies. A leading voice on India's energy transition. Shri Sinha co-chairs the World Economic Forum's Alliance of CEO Climate Leaders and has played a pivotal role in advancing large-scale renewable energy and decarbonization solutions. I invite Ms. Srijita Chakrabarti, young professional from NITI Aayog, to felicitate. Okay. Sorry. Suman Sinha ji pronounce. Suman Sinha ji, Poonam. Okay. So Ms. Poonam Kapoor ji, research officer, will now felicitate Suman Sinha. Our next panelist is Shri Ghanshyam Prasad ji, chairperson, Central Electricity Authority. He is an ex-officio secretary to the Ministry of Power, Government of India, with over 3 decades of experience in the power sector, a 1989 batch officer of the Central Power Engineering Services. I request Ms. Neha Mahesh, young professional with NITI Aayog, to kindly felicitate Shri Ghanshyam Prasad ji by presenting a sapling to him. Our next panelist is Shri Rajat Gupta ji, senior partner, McKinsey & Company, a leader in the firm's energy, minerals, and sustainability practice in Asia. Shri Gupta has advised governments and major corporations on decarbonization and large-scale transformations. I now invite Ms. Princhila Gandhi, young professional NITI Aayog, to kindly present a sapling to Shri Rajat Gupta ji. We have Shri Deepak Arora ji with us, our next panelist, Head of Government Relations, ArcelorMittal Nippon Steel India, having 2 decades of experience at the intersection of public policy, sustainability, and corporate strategy. He has worked with national and international institutions, including UNIDO, previously held senior public affairs and CSR leadership roles at Naira Energy and SR Group. I would request Ms. Radhika Talekar, young professional of NITI Aayog, to kindly felicitate Shri Deepak Arora ji by presenting a sapling to him. And moderator of this session is Dr. O.P. Agarwal ji. He's a distinguished fellow at NITI Aayog, senior advisor to the World Bank, professor of practice at the Indian School of Public Policy and IIT Roorkee. He is a former IS officer, a leading expert on urban transport, cities, and climate policy, and he was the principal author of India's urban transport policy. May I invite Dr. Swati Saini, consultant NITI Aayog, to come on the dais and kindly felicitate Dr. O.P. Agarwal and present a sapling to him. And now I hand it over to Dr. O.P. Agarwal ji, moderator of this session. Thank you.
Good afternoon, friends. Distinguished celebrities on the dais, distinguished audience. I was wondering, how does one moderate a panel with such eminent people on the dais? But that's the task given to me, so I will go ahead and do that. Just a couple of remarks that I would make by way of an opening statement. When our Honorable Prime Minister made this Panchamrit announcement at Glasgow, I used to then head WRI India, a lot of work around climate, and we were very happy that an announcement had been made and a target date had been set. It may not have been 2050, it was 2070, but what made me particularly happy was that India was one of the few countries that also gave targets for 2030. To my mind, that gave a lot of credibility to India's commitments. But the one thing that kept coming in my mind is so many things need to be done. You need pathways for so many different sectors. Who's going to do that? How is it going to come together? That had been on my mind for a long time till today. I think today I must congratulate Mr. BVR Subramaniam, Anshu and others for coming together and bringing out this report with so many sectors, laying out a national pathway, and I hope the respective ministries would take that forward and really start implementing that, because this is something that was badly missing. Now, having said that, let me add a few words about a sector that I know a little bit about, that's transport. A few things that need to be kept in mind when it comes to transport, and I will pick up from what Mr. BVR Subramaniam said in the morning. I think in his own inimicable way, he laid down those 4 or 5 very simple principles of shift to electric, clean electricity, circularity, demand management, and I think one other point that he made, finance. Now, let me convert that to transport using maybe slightly different jargon, but really lay out how that applies to transport in multiple ways. And that's, there are 5 things that I think transport needs to look at using those same principles. One is improve efficiency of existing technologies. But there are limits to how far you can go by improving technology itself. The second is shift to clean modes. What that means is shift from road and airlines to waterways and rail. Then shift to cleaner fuels. And cleaner fuels here means in many ways shifting out of petroleum fuels into electricity and other cleaner fuels. I think there's one thing that needs to be thought of is how do we optimize existing capacity. That means, how do we look at same passenger miles being served by fewer vehicle miles? So vehicles that run empty, 3/4 of the vehicle is empty, how do we make sure that each of those seats is full? Because every empty seat in a moving vehicle is actually a wasted resource. So converting that into optimizing the existing capacity itself, maybe through shared vehicles, maybe through some other modes. I think that is one way of doing it. Well, we've always talked about looking at public transport. But I think let's not look at public transport only as moving from personal vehicles to metro systems. I think public transport has many others which are lower cost options for India. The financing requirements will come down. Buses are a very good option, but buses are not of the same type. When we talk about buses, we all talk about affordability, but it's not necessary that buses should all be in that affordable category. We are also looking at people who have personal motor vehicles today wanting to shift to public transport or being expected to shift to public transport. They are not looking for affordable buses, but they're looking for quality buses. Now, quality buses can charge more, and these don't need subsidies from the government. It's a kind of premium bus service that we need to give a little more attention to. Second, it's not just road to rail. I think shifting from air to rail is equally important. How do we shift from air to rail? A lot of short-haul flights can be replaced by high-speed rail, and the last budget has talked a lot about high-speed rail. I think wherever we have high-speed rail, can we cut back on short-haul flights? Some countries in Europe have done that, something that we should look at. The other one I would sort of highlight is the importance of inland water transport. As the Secretary Transport in Assam several years ago, I've spent a lot of time looking at inland water transport, and I think what it lacks is good enough attention to it. There's a lot of potential, but I think we need to pay a little more attention to strengthening IWT infrastructure and IWT vessels. But these are a few comments that I just want to make as far as transport, because you have many more scholars who can speak about others, and that's why I'll leave it at that. And I will request Vice Chairman NITI Aayog, Mr. Suman Berry, to kindly give his remarks. So you are first on this. So.
I have complicated everybody's life. I thought I would just be here as an observer to listen to the panels, because as a lifetime think tanker, I see these as an opportunity to learn, but the ceremony kind of gets in the way. And so, please, I would much rather be the night watchman and react to what others say, if you don't mind.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Agarwal. Maybe I'll just start with a few comments and observations. I had the good fortune of looking at the main report, the summary this morning, early this morning. Maybe starting with in 2023, McKinsey did a report that I had led, which I like to call the Shadow National Plan for Decarbonization, which did cover many of the sectors that we are going to be talking about today, and the reports have been released for many of them. And one of the recommendations in that, which I'm so glad has been implemented today, was for India to have an official living plan of this nature. So it's really great that we've done the first version of this multi-sectoral plan for India's decarbonization. I'll come back to that term in a moment. And my compliments to NITI Aayog, the Vice Chairman, the CEO, and Anshu and his team to have driven this. Let me make remarks on a few topics. What is the real problem that we need to solve for India on the topic of decarbonization? There is a challenge in this environment of slowing progress globally across the 25 physical building blocks of decarbonization. I'll talk a bit about where we stand globally and therefore what implications might that have for India and its implementation. The real opportunities that this opens up, of course, we've talked a lot about them, but I'll talk about 2 or 3 that I'm seeing as newer opportunities. And then perhaps if we have a moment or two, I might talk a bit about adaptation. How do we define the problem? Is it a decarbonization problem or is it a different problem for India? China has managed to get up to almost 15 billion tons of emissions as a part of its development journey and is now working to create an electrostate or an electrified state and accelerating decarbonization. One may say that they may have peaked or thereabouts their emissions. US and Europe emissions together at about roughly 10 billion tons, but have over the last 30 years reduced 20 to 30% from their peaks, largely from efficiency, mobility, electrification of mobility, and particularly in the US, also in Europe, gas. So it's an ongoing decarbonization journey that they have. India, I believe in a business as usual mode, would go from about 3.5 billion tons to 12 billion tons, another China, definitely through the next 20, 30 years. But the opportunity for us is that 80% of India hasn't been built yet. And can we build this right? So to me, the problem statement is not one of decarbonization and not looking back, which is, by the way, something that I see, for example, Southeast Asian countries, similar state of development as us doing and really defocusing their attention. But really the problem statement has to be one, and which is what, Anshu, you have picked up on this report, of building India right. So I think we should stop using the word, including myself, decarbonization, but really about building India in a decarbonized manner or building India right. The real challenge here is going to be technology, the readiness and the costs of technology, again, something that was discussed a moment ago in the last panel too. Coming together with regulatory support, because these technologies do need to be matured over time, right? I mean, in 40 years, the cost of solar panels has come down by 99% through a series of technology and manufacturing interventions, as well as supply chain interventions. We have our own success stories. The renewable story is a huge success story where technology, led by China and the tailwinds that it provided, and regulation, the solar mission as it evolved and subsequently into SECI, has led to a very competitive renewable base being established. Again, not something that every country in the world has been able to do. If you look particularly at our peers in Southeast Asia, they have not been able to inject large amounts of renewable into their grids. The other is our story on electric mobility, not yet played out, perhaps because the products aren't there. The small format vehicles, two-wheelers, etc., very much in the money. Why? Because the taxation structure of our liquid fuels, transportation fuels, lead to $140 to $240 carbon price, implicit, on transportation fuels. So hopefully a success story in the making if we can get the products there, particularly as the battery costs dropped. So I think the story here is one of not decarbonization, but of building India right, and we've done it in some sectors. We are doing it in some, and we have to do it in others. Maybe I'll pause there for now and come back to some other commentary as we go along. So should I make one or two more comments? Yeah? Okay. All right. So let me just spend then a couple of moments on the building blocks. There are 25 building blocks physical as we see it across 7 parts of the system, of the energy system particularly. And McKinsey's assessment is that the world has made a journey of about 15% of what's required for these physical building blocks to get developed, low emission technologies to get developed. In the last couple of years, it's moved by a couple of percentage points, right? So clearly inadequate and a mixed view going forward on each of these, right? So let me just give you a few examples of this. The momentum is strongest on low emission power, clearly, also in India. Electrifying transportation, particularly in China, is picking up dramatically. Critical mineral supplies, though a source of worry for us here in India, has accelerated. At least the availability is becoming wider. Now, there's, of course, geopolitics that comes to play here in terms of its availability for specific countries. Progress is mostly stuck in the tougher-to-do areas like carbon capture, hydrogen fuels, and heavy industry, where there was a lot of hope 3 or 4 years ago. China accounts for 2/3 of additional solar and wind power capacities and electric vehicle sales in the last 3 years. So clearly there's disproportionate progress in China, some progress in US, quite a bit of progress in India relative to its geographic size, and then a lot of dark in the rest of the world. The outlook for the hardest to abate areas, the hardest to abate technologies or physical parameters has become worse. So hydrogen projects, for example, across the world are being cancelled. The demand side signals for this that were beginning to come into place a couple of years ago have abated quite a bit. And so I think the world is in a mixed place, a much worse place than 2-3 years ago, and we see that in many, many announcements that are being made across the world. And maybe my last set of comments for now would be that to get this right for India, there's a set of actions that we need to take now, in this decade, to build India right in the next decade and the decade after that, or the decades after that. I think that is the primary thesis that I think the report also in some ways reinforces, but I would certainly reinforce that, and let me illustrate that with a few additional deeper points, right? So what needs to happen here, right? So accelerating technologies is one example. Let me take the example of steel, which is a sector that I well understand. We have capacity of about 140, 150 million tons of steel making. 80 million tons of that capacity is coal-based in some form or the other. 20% is scrap-based or recycling capacity, which is then very low carbon. In a business as usual scenario of technology development, of regulatory support, this 80% would continue through to the next decade and perhaps even through to the next decade after that. Let me do a thought exercise here. If 2 situations come together, it's magically probably, we could potentially see 2/3 of the capacity being either hydrogen-based or scrap-based, more green, and only 1/3 of being coal-based in the next 15 to 20 years. What are those two magical things that could make this happen? One is $2 hydrogen, and the second is a $50 carbon price. And a third thing, which has to enable this or make this come true, is a surety of that today for happening in the next 5-7 years. Because if the sector is provided surety of these 2 things, magical things coming together, then the industry has the ability to invest. Now, this is not going to happen. We probably won't be at 80% carbon-based steel making. We won't be at 2/3 green steel making. We'll be probably somewhere in between, because the technology does have to be developed for hydrogen-based steel making and for hydrogen itself to become competitive. And the carbon price isn't yet in place, and I don't see it coming into place. So this is just one illustration of how in one sector, cross-sectoral forces have to kind of come together to make this, to make the decarbonization happen. Similarly, there are many others. Maybe I'll make one more last comment, which is the right targeting of our resources. Again, something that I don't know if the report talks about. I didn't look at it closely enough to be able to say. But if you take agri-waste and agri-resources, sugarcane, for example, in India, today, these are being directed towards power, agri-waste towards power generation, and sugarcane towards ethanol for ground transportation. In my view, the value and use from a decarbonization perspective of these is best for high temperature heat for agri-waste, like in steel or cement, and agri, 1G, 2G ethanol or biofuels for hard-to-abate sectors like aviation. So I think one of the other things that we also have to think about is very sharply think about putting our resources in the right place where their value will be the most from an abatement perspective. Maybe with that, let me pause and just reiterate the fact that we have to act today on many of the dimensions that I talked about, and I'm sure many of the panelists here will talk about, to build India right in the next decade and the next.
Mr. Sinha, if I could request you.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much to NITI Aayog for inviting me for this discussion today. I went through the report as well on my way here, and I found it was really remarkable. I don't think I've seen a document like this before, which lays out so clearly what the government's trajectory is, what the government's path, policy making, what the private sector needs to do, what the financiers need to do, not just over the next 5 or 10 years, but over the next 45 years. And I think that is a seminal achievement. So hats off to everybody from NITI Aayog that has contributed to making this really a reality. And then obviously, updating this on a regular basis, making it a living document, I think is something that will give all of us in the sector real deep understanding of what the future is like, and therefore that will allow us to make our own plans for what we need to do in our respective areas. Let me talk about 3-4 different areas which are based around electricity. To me, one of the most seminal or the most important outcomes is the fact that energy is going to grow at 4% a year on average over the next many years. Within that, electricity, which is today 20% of energy, will grow to about 60% and beyond. And within electricity, renewable energy or clean energy has to go from the current maybe 10 or 15% up to almost in the net zero scenario, up to about 95% along with nuclear. So when you add all of those 3 sort of separate transitions that are happening here, you come to a number of renewables having to go today from 160 gigawatts up to 6,000 gigawatts by 2070. Now that seems like a huge number, and it is. But the reality is, when you look at it in terms of the compounded growth rate, it's only 10%. It's not a huge number if you just look at it over the sort of long period of time. But it's still a very important number, because obviously doing 10% on, let's say, 5,000 gigawatts does mean 500 gigawatts a year. And it's not going to play out that way. It'll be much more front-loaded, as the report also says, and then it'll taper off a little bit towards the back end. So what are the different things that we need to do to make sure that this whole thing gets front-loaded and we really get off to a really, really rapid start to make sure that we get onto that trajectory very quickly? Now, in some ways, we already have. Last year, we did 50 gigawatts of renewables in the last calendar year on an installed base of only 110 gigawatts. So we actually had almost 40-45% growth, which is terrific. Obviously, it's much more than the 10%. And we need to keep doing that consistently over the next 5 to 10 years. So what are the things that I feel we need to do to make sure that this ramp up, that this steep ramp up happens in the first several years? Number one, I think, and the report talks about a lot of these issues. So in some ways, I'm just reiterating what the report already mentions, but highlighting what I think are the important aspects of this. Number one factor here, to my mind, is that behind electricity, there is a grid. And if that grid does not come up at the same pace as generating capacity, or it does not get managed in the right way, then that can lead to fundamental constraints on how capacity can be added into the grid. So to me, grid management and grid build-out is the number one priority that underlays all of these, all of our ability to execute and achieve all of these big numbers that we have. And there, right now, clearly, it's not just a question of building out the central grid. We also have to build out state grids, and we also have to build out local distribution and last-mile connectivity into homes, and make sure that all the smart meters and so on are installed in the appropriate manner. So I think that, to me, is number one priority. Number two priority is the place where, in some ways, the capacity, generating capacity meets the end customer is through the distribution utilities. That is sort of, in some ways, the single biggest piece of reform that we've not had yet in the sector. And that is something that does need to happen in whichever way. And there are multiple ideas, of course, that can address that problem. A change of hands in terms of ownership is not necessarily required, but certainly an improvement in efficiency is required. Of course, the change in hands is also a solution, moving it into the private sector and so on. So I think that is another very important aspect that needs to be looked at, because ultimately, if that part of the value chain is not healthy, then all the generation that we do will not, and all the grid that we build out is not going to meet the end customer in the right way. And ultimately, tariffs are not going to flow back, and investments will not flow back into the system. The third very important aspect is the issue of bankability, which again the report does mention in some detail. The reason I'm bringing it up is because bankability is different from investments. There is, as the report says, a lot of capital available, but that capital will not flow in until that capital is able to get the right returns from the right kinds of risk-adjusted projects. And there are a number of things that need to be addressed on the bankability front right now. And these are discussions that we've been having with both the Ministry of Power and with MNRE, and in fact also with the CEA as well multiple times. We have to first of all figure out how to do this whole load forecasting of what renewable energy is going to be generating so that the grid is able to manage it easier. We have issues around curtailment that have started off because the grid is not getting built out fast enough, and therefore projects don't get connected with permanent connectivity fast enough. We have change in law issues because laws change, tariffs that we've bid out don't change. And the correction mechanism to reform the tariffs or to change the tariff is very cumbersome right now and does take 18 to 24 months to come in. We've had sort of one-off issues like we've had with respect to the Section 68 approvals where it went to the Supreme Court and so on. So there are quite a lot of these kinds of one-off issues that keep coming up that require to be dealt with in the right way because ultimately keep in mind that the way the capacity is allocated is through a comparative auction mechanism that does not leave a lot of room on the table in terms of extra returns. And then those returns get eaten up by some of these leakages in the projects in the future, then bankability fundamentally gets impacted. And that is something that we have to make sure does not happen if we need all of these trillions of dollars of investments to come in. So these are three fundamental, I think, building blocks that need to be addressed in electrification and renewable energy driving that electrification. There are 3-4 other points I would like to make. One is that the report has very much looked at it from a India lens. And it does talk about the export market and how India can really position itself. But I think we need to really drive that a lot more seriously. I think India has to, and Rajat mentioned it in passing, we have to become another electrostate really competing with China. And there is no reason that we can't do that. We've seen our module capacity go up to almost 150 gigawatts in the last literally 2 to 3 years. Capacity can be created, and it can rival that of China. But we are maybe 10, 20 years behind them, if not more. But we have to play catch-up, and we can play catch-up. We have a large domestic market. We have enlightened leadership in policy making. We have a very active private sector that is operating here. There's no reason why we can't channelize in the right way, really do what needs to be done to make sure that India becomes a very, very strong electrostate, as it were, and becomes a big exporter of manufacturing products from here into the rest of the world. And I think that's an important aspect that we should also work on in addition to looking, of course, at what we need to do for the Indian market, which, of course, is a fairly large item by itself. The second thing I would say is that there is going to be a cost to this transition. It's not going to be costless. Dr. Saraswat talked about green hydrogen being more expensive. And the fact that is, in fact, slowing down the rollout of green hydrogen into certain areas. And for example, steel and some of these other areas like refining and fertilizers, it will take longer to roll out. And if it does take longer to roll out, are we going to be able to meet our transition targets as has been set out in the report? And so the question is, in the beginning when these costs are higher, who takes that extra cost? Does the industry take it? Does government provide subsidy? In what is the right mechanism to do that is something that we need to think about, because otherwise some of these technologies that we require, which are more expensive in the beginning, will not necessarily take off as they should. The third thing is essentially around the fact that we need also to look at some of our newer technologies. For example, there are things like geothermal, nuclear fusion, that will come up. That will come up in the next 10 to 15 years that are not there right now. And of course, in that sense, we'll have to factor in or think through how some of those things come into the equation as we go through our own journey in this area. And the last thing I would say is that what is going to be very critical to drive a lot of this activity is going to be a very, very strong public-private partnership, because this does require a whole of government and a whole of private sector approach. And when I say whole of private sector, I mean not just people like us as developers, but also the financiers, also public sector banks, private sector banks, international bond markets. We all have to work together to make some of these things happen. And when I say whole of government, I mean that all the government departments have to work together with each other. So sometimes we see that there are some gaps between some of the ministries that we work with, and that is something that also causes slowdown and so on. So I think both sides need to improve their capability and their seamlessness, but they also need to work very, very closely with each other to make these targets happen. And I think it is possible. Certainly, I think the net zero target, the scenario is very much achievable, because when you look at it in aggregate, it's not such a huge growth, although the numbers seem very large. And I think we can do it, because I think we've shown that over the last few years, when we started off this industry, let's say about 10 years ago, and when the Prime Minister had set the target of getting to 175 gigawatts back in 2015, and then increase that to 500, in 2019. These targets seemed really, really way out, and there was a lot of skepticism around these numbers. But we are showing that it can be done. And when I say we, I mean both the policymakers and industry working together. And I see no reason why, if we extrapolate that, we cannot achieve the targets of 2050, first of all, and then the 2070 numbers. So I think net zero is eminently possible. Thank you all so much for listening to me, and thank you, NITI Aayog, for coming up with this beautiful report. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Sinha. Can I now request Mr. Deepak Arora?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Deepak Arora, and I work for ArcelorMittal Nippon Steel. First of all, thank you for inviting me here and jumping on straight to the topic. I think we all realize that industrial transformation and climate ambitions advance together. While I say this with a word of caution. And in my view, we should first attempt a near zero kind of a situation before we are attempting a net zero situation. And to that in effect, I think the target that we've set for ourselves as a nation, looking at 2070, is a fairly appropriate target. And we are all confident in the industry that by 2070, we will eventually accomplish the net zero situation. And so to reach that stage where we are from near zero to net zero, because the last mile, as we are all aware, is the most difficult part in any transition. And the transition should look like a transition. So it has to be right in that sense. And there are no single pathways. Even when we come to the steel sector, there is no single technology pathway that we have towards net zero. And to that extent, I believe that the fundamental concept of carbon tax, it is my individual disagreement to that, because I do believe that within our existing setup and within our existing processes, there is a lot of potential for efficiency to be included even now. And as an industry, we are all aware, and gradually everybody is making that transition, because we are reinforced that the need of that transition on a daily basis. Steel, as we know, is really foundational to net zero. You look at any product around you, there is a little bit of steel, and one very famous advertisement of older days, which was about Tata Steel, little bit of steel in everyone. So it's true, there is steel everywhere around us, and what we also know, that steel does account for almost 7 to 8% of carbon dioxide emissions, which is fairly large. So when the emissions are large, when the footprint is large, the amount of efforts that are required are also in equal proportion. And that's where the industry needs to rise up. India is today the second largest producer of crude steel in the world. And the largest producer is, of course, China, which is by miles ahead of us. We are close to 150 million tons, as Rajat mentioned. China is upwards of 1,000 metric tons every year. And they have integrated mines. Of course, we also have mines. The capacity is expected to reach 300 million tons by 2030-31. We are all talking about the per capita consumption rising from 70 to 108, and now the expectation is it will be 160 by 2030. So we all know that factually there is a growth over there, and India is growing, and if India grows, the steel industry grows, the emissions grow, everything grows in tandem. Okay. So we do realize that as an organization, we are one of the few green steel producers in India, and we have a 3-star green certified steel as well, which is where the carbon footprint is less than 2.2 tons per ton of finished steel. Moving on to the next part of the point which I wanted to make, we all realize that technology is going to be a major game changer. There are multiple pathways that the steel industry is using at the moment. Blast furnace, of course, is the most widely used technology. Of course, the introduction of green hydrogen is going to be a very, very key factor in the transition when we are using blast furnace. But there are also emerging technologies which are there. The other end of the spectrum is the Corex technology, which is directly from ore you can produce coal. But the more fundamental issue is not technology only around the blast furnace and the steel making process. If you look at the entire value chain of how the mineral is extracted, the mineral is processed, it is pelletized as one intermediate process and then converted into a finished product. The point which I was making earlier is that at each step in the value chain before you produce finished steel, there are umpteen number of opportunities to gradually move towards a near zero kind of situation. And I take one example over here. In the mining process, when you produce mine, there is a residual product which is called tailings. And now it has, because there is a lot of water over there, it is almost 60% water and then 40% is iron ore. So in India, we don't have the technology to use it. But there is an intermediate technology available. You can use a filtration technology, put it into cakes, and then maybe you reuse it for something else. Similarly, in the steel process, there is slag. Slag is used for construction of roads. So when you elongate that value chain into products and byproducts, what one realizes is that at the end of it, you are looking at probably a residual of 5% or 7%, maybe 10%, not more than that. Now, there are intermediate solutions which are readily available. Now, as an institution, as a country, as a nation, I think it is those intermediate solutions that need to be targeted first so that we reach a near zero solution. I'll take another example over here. When we talk of especially mines, now lesser grade iron ore which is left over, which is typically less than 40% Fe content, we export. And because we don't have the technology to use it. But what are we doing in return? We are importing higher grade iron ore from outside. So the intermediate solution to us is that can we not develop a technology over here where we migrate into using that less than 40% iron ore here? And it is not impossible. There are possibilities, and bit by bit, the industry is moving in that direction. Another important point, I think, which was also mentioned by Rajat partly, recycling numbers in India are fairly low. And I don't need to go into the details. By our very basic understanding, we know that if steel has already been produced, your recycling cost will be much, much, much lower. Of course, there are again asymmetries over there. There are challenges in collection. There are also challenges in collection of data. Because it's in India, typically if you go out through our historical mindset and abilities, we've always been historically a nation which has recycled every product to its last T. Even if a fabric which is discarded otherwise can get converted into many uses. Gradually, we are, of course, losing that kind of touch. But the recycling is really one of the most important elements that one needs to look at. That's one important point. Similarly, another dimension that I would like to place over here is that the products that we are manufacturing, and gradually we are again moving in that direction, where the longevity of the product that we are producing is much more. So the moment your longevity of the product is much more, the usage automatically becomes much lesser. For the solar sector, as you are aware, there is a product called Magnelis, which is, it doesn't rust. It's a self-healing steel. So the world is moving in that direction where the technology is evolving quite rapidly. And that's the point which I wanted to make, that these are multiple pathways that we need to consider, not limit our conversations and discourse to hydrogen as one large element of how the net zero would really be arrived at. Yeah. And CCUS has already been spoken, so I won't go into too much details into the CCUS bit. Yeah. The last point which I wanted to make, again, going back to my example of the mining, and I was taking the example of that you can produce cakes. Now, the production, the sphere and the production places where it happens are fairly distributed across India. Now, if I take the example of mining and you are able to do filtration and let's say produce cakes which can be used, the industry, because these are areas which are in the hinterland. So either the industry has to come up over there, otherwise the logistics costs of taking these products as an intermediate product into a different part of the country and using that for consumption. With your 15-17% logistics cost added to that, that will not happen. So reindustrialization in pockets where these industries are there and a downstream development of clusters aligned to what is the residual product available in these sectors. That's another pathway that we should really look at. With that, I will end my initial comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Arora. Can I now move to...
Good afternoon everyone, and let me at the outset thank NITI Aayog for inviting me to be a part of this particular session. Let me at the outset say that Central Electricity Authority has been the part and parcel of the architect, I'll say, of the first report that was launched today, that's Sectoral Insights on Power. The two gentlemen is here, Mr. Ishan Saran and Mr. Irfan, who did the entire work on doing the demand forecasting. Not an easy task to forecast in a time frame of 2070 with a given kind of erratic behavior that you see in the power sector. Another gentleman who is doing the internal integrated resource planning, he really took the present situation and tried to see some forecast into it and tried to see what best figures we can arrive in the 2070 time frame. Sinaji mentioned about some figures, but these are all figures which are based on the present technology that we have in the country. Technology will keep changing, the scenarios will keep changing, and I keep saying in such a forum that in my 35 years of career, I have seen the technology change to a different ballgame altogether. We started with conventional generations. Now we are in a different ballgame altogether, and we are towards a situation where we are going towards renewables. Maybe after 20, 30 years, you will find some other construct coming in, and probably we'll have to be revising these kind of projections. So the first thing that we must remember is that the technologies will keep on changing, and these plans will have to be made dynamic. And this dynamism will have to be incorporated as we go along. And this is what we have started doing in CA, particularly with respect to the resource adequacy plan, particularly for the next 10 years and then going up to next 2047 and even going forward. Just in the morning session, I was attending the 5th Global Electricity Mobility Summit. And that gave such a vast projection of EVs, probably going from 1% to 8% in last 6 years and targeting around 49% by 2030. So next 5 years going to up to 49%. So that's a kind of things that means, this is one example I gave you. What I see right now is in most of the segments, whether it is power sector or any other sectoral reports that you have seen, or any other this thing which has power jugglers, you'll find that these all will be almost like an exponential curve that you'll find it taking shape. And after some time, you'll find them flattening, and then comes the maturity level. What we are targeting probably is could be 2047 when the country becomes developed, and after that development, probably the growth rate might start retarding to some extent. Faster we do, I think probably better challenges will be there to the industry to support in terms of the supply chain issues and in terms of the building of the infrastructure altogether. Particularly in the power sector, which is going to support, and rightly mentioned today, that we are the percentage of 22% or 25% that we have right now will definitely go to 45% and go to 60, then go to 90-95% at the end of the period of 2070. But this can be achieved if and only if we don't have any kind of a supply chain disruptions. Supply chain in all segments, not only the power sector, but in all sectors taken together. And if we have to do that, probably we'll have to increase the manufacturing capacity, which we don't have right now and for which we are dependent on outside the country. We have already seen a number of cases where because of the supply chain disruptions, the growth got hampered. Rightly pointed out regarding the challenges that the grid operation is going to face, and we are cautious about it. And being a technical organization, we'll try to take care that we don't see much of our disruptions as we go along, and all the technicalities will have to be factored in along with the integration of renewable energy sources. What is going to be more challenging is the pace with which we are growing at present, and it's not only solar and wind that is in the pipeline. But very soon you will find battery energy storage systems and the hydro pump storage systems, which needs to be integrated into the grid. And until we do that, probably the things may not survive at that particular pace. So in this segment, I would like to also inform all of you that on 22nd of last month, we gave a roadmap of 100 gigawatt of hydro pump storage, which needs to be to be implemented in the country by 35. That means in next 10 years. So and nuclear, of course, already you all know about it. So the challenges of the grid operations, the challenges of the supply chain, the challenges of the new technology that is going to keep on emerging, probably all these are going to needs to be factored in as we go along. But at this moment, let me again say that NITI Aayog, CA has done a wonderful job together for making it in the power segment. Similarly, other ministries along with NITI Aayog has done for the other sectors as well. And when we take the entire sector and energy sector as a whole, then comes another element which we are now trying to push in, and that is how do we enter into the space of CCUS, that is carbon capture, utilization and storage. Probably, maybe this particular animal will be required at the fag end of the entire net zero scenario. And this time in the budget also, whatever as a CCUS mission, what I had been in the committee and whatever we had recommended has been put forth in the budget. So hopefully we'll try to see some traction on the R&D aspects initially, then pilots, and then taking it to some kind of large scale implementation in terms of the CCUS as well. So this is how we need to grow, and keeping the present scenario and the futuristic scenario in place, probably, and taking all these stakeholders together, probably I think we will be able to achieve the kind of net zero targets that the government has given to us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Prasad. So finally, can I request Mr. Suman Berry, Vice Chairman of NITI Aayog, to say his remarks?
Well, I hope not finally, because I still hope there'll be time for questions and answers. So I'm speaking from here because I'm a little height challenged and I may not be visible from behind the podium. I'm going to misuse my time, Chairman, by speaking in abstractions, perhaps repeating a little bit what I had to say yesterday, but just to make some possibly heretical points. I'm going to start sparked by, in a sense, what Rajat had to say, with something called the Tinbergen assignment rule. Tinbergen was the first recipient of the Nobel Prize in Economics, and he's widely associated amongst economists with the rule that that policymakers, to achieve N independent policy goals, need to have N independent policy instruments. And so I think it's quite important that if we define our trajectory as being about building out rather than being about emissions, what does that then mean in terms of what the goal is that we are trying to target? And in a minute, I'll come to the issue of cost and competitiveness. I mean, just listening to the conversation, I would say that, and that's also very much in Volume 1, we are concerned about competitiveness, affordability, economic security, of course, net zero, as we were reminded by Secretary MOEFCC yesterday. There's a solemn commitment made at Glasgow when, as it were, countries were committing to net zero in the emissions space. But that was, what, 2021? Here we are in 2026, and a lot of water has flowed under the bridge. And so thinking about whether net zero is only about emissions or whether it is a guidance to a wider transition, I think becomes important. And this is, I think, brings me to a second point, which I owe to McKinsey way back, when I was at NCR and Jairam Ramesh commissioned us to do some work pre-Copenhagen, which was the low-cost abatement curve. And so if it is indeed that all of this is about carbon, then we should be, in a sense, focused on the low-cost abatement curve. And that then indicates to me that it ought to be perhaps a bit more technology agnostic than where we have been going, which is a hydrogen mission, a CCUS mission, et cetera, because it's not clear to me that these are all on the low-cost abatement path. So it is for that reason, I believe, that some clarity about the assignment of instruments to goals becomes important. I would then move to, since we have two private sector representatives on the table, and I'm very pleased of that, I got to India from the World Bank in 2001, and in these 25 years, I think what we have seen is not one, certainly two transitions. And the first of those transitions was the unbundling of what was an integrated electricity system, let me put it that way, to the separation between, as we know, generation, transmission and generation. The important point being that that was when bringing in the private sector as merchant providers, with a lot of hiccups along the way, started to impose a great deal of stress on a system for specificity of contract, contract enforcement, etc. And if that was the baby steps 25 years ago, the situation, in a sense, with renewables has got completely inverted, because it is people like Sumant and others from the private sector who are in the vanguard of this transition. And here my question actually, and this is where I may be accused of being heretical, is that, is the competitiveness and the nimbleness of the private sector supported or in any ways impeded by the fact that the PSUs are entering into this game as well? I would want to, from that, go to what I understand to be the China story, and it links up with comments that have been made about our trajectory. So there is an academic who's now the head of the Fletcher School, Kelly Sims Gallagher, who started off looking at the renewable energy sector in China. And, the image that has been projected by those who haven't been able to keep up with China is that this is all as a result of great state subsidy, etc. Her story, and it's one academic story, is no. That basically China had restless entrepreneurs who were looking for a new avenue for their exports. And because Germany had already invested, I think, 100 billion euros in going down the solar curve, they thought that there was an opportunity here. And the rest is history. My point is that are we thinking of an industrial structure that has that kind of, as it were, agility? Because that is what we're going to need. And we must make sure that our regulatory and support frameworks are conducive to that kind of testing of being at the competitive frontier each time. I would finally make, I would make two final points. I'm old enough to have gone in Connaught Place to B. Ramachandran booksellers, taken there by my grandfather, and buying books about, as it were, the unlimited supply of cheap energy of the nuclear revolution. This was in the 1950s. And to some extent, we all know where that movie ended. And so I think making sure that we have diversity in our primary energy sources remains important and fundamental. Let me also here bring in another theorem or insight of economists, which is the green paradox, which is that if owners of fossil fuel resources, and I'm thinking here particularly of crude oil, but it could be natural gas as well, believe that, that in future those resources are going to be worth less, and I'm thinking here particularly of Saudi Arabia, they will have an incentive to extract at a more rapid rate. And so the question of whether we're going to put up barriers against that, or whether we are willing to, as it were, hunt with the hare, or whatever it is, hunt with the hounds. And I think that kind of, as it were, technology neutrality and flexibility is what we need to be aiming for. And that, to me, suggests a much, much more private sector oriented, as it were, industrial structure. These are, points that are at various, these are picked up at various points, but I think if this is actually to be a living document, we need to think about these issues perhaps a bit more seriously than we have. And thank you for the airtime.
Thank you very much, sir. We have a little bit of time. I know we've shot past time, but we'll still take a little bit of time to have a couple of questions, if anyone has them. If you can just raise your hand, and I don't know if there's a mic somewhere which can be used. Sir, any comments from you? No? Is there a mic somewhere there?
I think yesterday you mentioned it as well, that these are scenarios. And in yesterday's discussion, a question came up on political economy. Now, we have, as Ghanshyamji also pointed out, many possible futures. And there's a path dependency to some of these. So if you were, and some of you actually are the czars of the domains, what actions would you prioritize to actually take us towards the scenario, because this, as was emphasized yesterday, is not a prediction. The NZ scenarios are not a prediction. So earlier, I think someone pointed out a $50 carbon price. Rajat, you had mentioned. Is that the path that's needed? Which is the horse and which is the cart, I guess, to simplify my question?
I think the fundamentals of that is whatever is the least cost, probably we should adopt, which is going to support your economy and the growth.
I guess there's a choice between a loose path, which is continually adjusting and agile, and the need for investments, because the investments that we are talking about are 30, 40, 50-year investments. And therefore, the need, therefore, for certainty for those investments to pay back at a reasonable certainty. It doesn't have to be 100%. And so that paradox, the choice between those two will eventually, I think, determine how precise we are, because we will also go wrong on some of this.
What you've raised is obviously a very important question. The thing is, if you focus on the here and now, you're never going to build for the future. Because some of these things will require upfront investments. Some of these things will require us to do things that may be more expensive right now, in the hope that in the future, as technology evolves, as manufacturing scale-ups happen, as more R&D comes in, that cost will go down. And I think this is really where policy making has to be very, very refined and smart to figure out which are those things that eventually will have the trend downwards and therefore should be invested in right now, and those things that will not have that future potential, right? We are, of course, all familiar with the solar story, where it started, where it's got to right now. Not every technology will follow that path. Some will not, right? So I think that's really the smartness that we have to all demonstrate, I think, as we go forward.
But do you, I mean, there was something in the paper of large curtailment, which is now a charge in some ways on the public purse. So we are having discussions with PLI on phasing out subsidy. So what is the optimal form of government support so that, as it were, we don't overbuild and we remain nimble, would you say?
Actually, the thing is that, for example, if you just look at how the government approached the whole solar manufacturing area, there was a PLI that was given, but the PLI was so designed in such a restrictive way, and it was so small, that almost nobody is going to end up getting it, although there were many people who bid and qualified for it, but nobody's going to end up eventually getting the actual subsidy. And even if people did, it was just very small. So the real thing that has triggered this explosion in solar manufacturing, for example, is not PLI, it's really the ALMM restriction on stopping imports from China. And that is what has allowed people to start having the confidence that, okay, this is our market now, here we can start investing. Now, of course, in that scenario, the country could take the view that why should I buy more expensive domestic panels when I can buy cheaper imported panels? And that's where issues around national security and so on come in. That's where issues around, do I want to really try to become a +1 in clean tech exports also come in. And eventually, over time, we'll get the cost to come down. It's not that our costs are perennially going to be higher than what you can get from China. But we do need that initial protection. That is really what has allowed the whole sector to get started. And if you look at battery cells, for example, we haven't made those announcements yet. And that's why we haven't really seen the emergence of a domestic manufacturing system, even though there is PLI there as well. So I think you have to look at the totality of what is required for people to make long-range, large investments.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm Alok Sahai from Indian Steel Association. I have, Rajat mentioned about $50. There's also discussion that how do we have a low-cost abatement? I think there is a huge problem within the policymakers, I feel so, that they're confused. Can we go for a high cost, or can we afford a high cost, or can we only choose a low cost. Like let's take example of steel. Almost 12% of India's emission is on account of steel, and we do not have gases. We do not have high Fe content iron ore. We do not have scrap, and we will not have scrap for many years, and we will need steel for India to grow. There is no option, because demand is accelerating much more than the pace of the capacity, and we have to keep the capacity high. Given that situation, what are the options? The option is that we develop steel within India, or where the carbon footprint goes down, and for that we will have to invest in hydrogen. We will have to invest in the technology which adopts hydrogen. Say, today DRI, capacity has to increase. That capacity, that iron ore, we need a high Fe content iron ore. We are not focused on that because of royalty issues. There are a variety of issues. So how, I would only urge today at this table, all the top policy makers are sitting. Can we really focus? Either we go sector-wise, like what $50, or today in Europe it's about $80. So $50 is minimum required, so that there is some incentive for investment in low, green steel. So these are some of the issues I wanted to raise.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I, Dr. Bharat?
Yeah, I have just two observations. One is that, I think the whole of the study will really tell you what some of the immediate point actions you take. And I think many of these are in the R&D areas. We have to consider what are the long-term technologies we need and develop a huge plan for technology development, and R&D investment should be done now in the next few years, because that's what we're going to take. Secondly, I think when you are getting public support, you must do it in a way that it gradually disappears by itself. Otherwise, it will just hang on your neck and would provide no incentive for private sector to reduce cost or bring new innovations in it.
Thank you, sir. Any one or two more questions, and then we'll get the panel to respond. Please, please. Yeah. If you can give the mic, yeah.
Yeah, thank you for allowing me to ask a question. My name is Saurabh Rohila. I am from automobile OEM.
Get this closer to you so that...
Am I audible better? My name is Saurabh Rohila. I'm from auto background, auto OEM. I represent Toyota Kirloskar Motor. My question is about the reports. When we have, I think, firstly, congratulations to everyone here for the reports which have come out. Now, when we understand that the reports and the data will be living, more like a living document, how do we make sure when these reports, assuming that they will translate into some kind of policy formulation, I can speak for auto sector, how do we ensure or de-risk that while the reports are living based on various data and information and the technology development which will take place, but the policies do not create a lock-in for any technology or any kind of solutions to pan out. So that's my question.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we have to end by 1:30. That's why I'll not take any other questions, but panel, if anyone wants to respond to any of the points that have been made. But quickly.
Yeah, no, very quick comments. I think to the question of translating into policy, there's some that can probably be directly, but there's also several sets of next level plans that have to be thought through, right? You talked about a transportation modal mix plan. There's grid stability, which will be important in this. There's densification of urban areas, which then leads to overall lower carbon build out of the country. There's land plan, right, for the nation itself. So there are many sets of things that have to still probably be double clicked on and then converted into policy. And then maybe one last comment, also building on some of the points made here. These things are incredible opportunities. So what China has been able to do, perhaps initially via subsidies or non-market pricing, in terms of creating a true electrostate and leapfrogging technologies across everybody else in the world is something that's truly worth thinking about and worth investing. We won't get 100% of things right. But if we get 50-60% of our money spent right in leapfrogging and getting ahead of everybody else in the world, it'll be worth it. If we can do that in hydrogen, our hydrogen, with some subsidies built in, based on the recently discovered prices for ammonia, is the lowest cost hydrogen in the world. It competes with blue hydrogen today, which is unexpected, right? It's the lowest cost green hydrogen. Similarly, on clean tech industries, we have a $50 billion clean tech plus power electrical industry. We can make a $200 billion industry happen. So there are opportunities that this opens up if we have a steady hand around some of this.
Yeah, I think the mantra seems to be, particularly in the power sector, what we had adopted as a policy maker is take quickest action for the short-term measures, then to the medium, and then to the long-term measures. So we have divided our policies into 3 segments: short, medium, and long-term. You have 100% visibility for the short terms. Do it as soon as possible. Medium term, at least certainty is there. Again, take your own time in a phased manner. Long term can be with respect to your R&D, etc., and those things is being in the pipelines. Yeah. And this has really led us to more of the private sector jumping into the power sector. Right now, from the resources side, if I say the generation side, it is dominated by the private sector people. Particularly in the renewables, it is mostly by the private sector only. In the hydro pump storage, let me tell you the new area which is emerging. 100 gigawatt target, what we have set in, all 100 gigawatt is coming from the private sector itself. So this is the kind of push that has been given as a policy makers. You talked about the new avenues. Saudi Arabia, I think somebody mentioned about Saudi Arabia. I think we are also trying to have an interconnection with Saudi Arabia. That's a futuristic plan, maybe with Saudi Arabia, with UAE, so that we can harness their gas generation during the non-solar hours when we need that kind of electricity. Probably that, and they will also try to have some kind of a complementary need from our country. So these are futuristic plans that will take its own time. But what is required is take the shortest decision, whatever is the short-term time frame, do it as quickly as possible, and that is how we have changed the philosophy of changing our plans dynamically every year or every 6 months, so that you don't falter or you don't waste your time in faulting the planning process itself. Thank you.
Yeah. May I make one point? Yeah. So I think this is a point which I often make. We are a federal structure. We have state rules, we have central laws, we have state policies. And many a times there is less alignment between, let's say, one central ministry and another central ministry. And when this cascades down to state, especially areas which are electricity is one very key area, mining is yet another area. So we have set a target for steel manufacturing to go up to 300 million tons. But the commensurate changes that are required in other departments and ministries, whether it is central or state, that doesn't happen. So a lot of cost actually gets added because of that. A lot of inefficiencies and operational obstructions emerge because of this. So my own estimate, this is several years ago, I had done a small rough calculation. Almost 12 to 13% cost savings can be done only if we are able to make this entire structure seamless. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I won't take more than a minute. I think that there are, of course, there's such a lot of richness in the report that we can talk about it for a long duration of time. My feeling is that that just like the CA is preparing the plans for electricity and the grid, I think every single ministry, every single state needs to also do their own plan. And all of that needs to get into a seamless whole and needs to point in the same direction. I think once that is achieved, then we can all be very clear that this is the path that we are incontrovertibly now on. And I think so that to me is sort of in some ways the next agenda that if it can be done would really give all of us a lot more confidence that this scenario is the one that we're all aligned behind.
Just that, we have our demographic moment. We need to be competitive globally. So we've seen, as it were, the impact of expensive power on Europe, as it were. So to me, if we are going to adopt a build-out framework rather than an emissions framework, competitiveness has to be key.
Thank you, sir. I think we'll have to come to the end of this session. It's past 1:30. I think you have someone to give a vote of thanks.
So with this, we conclude this panel discussion, and we would like to thank all our panelists, esteemed guests. Shri Suman Beriji, Vice Chairperson, NITI Aayog; Shri Ghanshyam Prasad ji, Chairperson, Central Electricity Authority; Shri Suman Sinha ji, CEO, Renew Power; Shri Rajat Gupta ji, Senior Partner, McKinsey; Shri Deepak Arora ji, Head Government Relations, ArcelorMittal Nippon Steel India; and moderator Shri O.P. Agarwal ji, Distinguished Fellow, NITI Aayog. And may I request all our esteemed panelists to kindly come forward for the group photograph. So now, ladies and gentlemen, there will be a lunch break of 1 hour, broadly, but then, as you know, we have one more session post-lunch and also one panel discussion. So please grab your meal and try to come as early as possible. And there's an announcement for the lunch. The lunch for VIPs has been arranged in Vaishali Hall, which is at the right side of the exit of Bheem Hall at the first floor. Guests may access through stairs or elevators. And for other participants, lunch will be served in the open space areas and Shravasti Hall on the same floor. So thank you for now. And please do reassemble here in this hall around 2:30. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Actually, I say I will not use that word. We need to be somewhere.